Okay, I'm going to get started with this next topic, eliminating the pollution of doubt, mastering confidence, and developing wisdom. This is the second fetter out of all the 10 fetters that the Buddha discovered. Remember what a fetter is. It's like a shackle with a chain and a ball. This is how they kept prisoners trapped in a certain place during ancient times, is they would have a shackle around your ankle with a chain and a ball. And the Buddha described these 10 pollutions of mind as fetters, that they're 10 fetters because it's keeping you trapped in the unenlightened state. And in order to get to enlightenment, you're eradicating these 10 fetters out of the mind. Everything that you're learning and practicing on the path to enlightenment in one way or another is helping you to eradicate these 10 pollutions of mind. Even the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 Precepts, meditation training, all of these things are working to eliminate the 10 fetters in one way or another. But then as you're progressing and developing the foundational teachings, you're going to start noticing that as you're putting together the Eightfold Path, you're going to experience those jhanas, those preliminary phases that the mind experiences before it gets into the first stage of enlightenment. And that's like the light bulb is flickering. You're starting to get various qualities of mind that are starting to be experienced. And as you do, you start transitioning and start focusing on eradicating these individual fetters one by one. So that's why you'll need to know what each fetter is, what the symptoms are, what are the tools and techniques that you use in order to eradicate it, and then how to know that it's actually been eradicated. So that's what I'm going to help you do now with this particular fetter of doubt, and then we're going to move on to wrong behavior and observances as well. So here with the pollution of doubt, what doubt is where an individual's mind has doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and their ability of them to attain enlightenment. This is very common when anybody comes to the path to enlightenment, that there's doubt in the mind. But what you're going to see is the way to eliminate this is not through blind faith or blind belief or anything like that. So I'll explain that to you here in a moment. So there's a certain amount of doubt. Did this person actually live? Is there really somebody named Gautama Buddha? Was he really a prince? Did he really teach? Do those Pali Canon books, those 45 volumes, really describe how to get to this enlightened mental state? Is enlightenment even possible? Is it possible to train the mind to even get to that point? This peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy sounds a little bit too good to be true. Is it really true? Is it possible? Who could ever imagine somebody figuring this out by themselves, right? These are some of the thoughts that the mind might have when it has doubt. So doubt is doubt about the teachings and their ability of them to attain enlightenment. The symptoms that you'll experience because of doubt is complacency. The mind will get complacent and be like, that stuff isn't going to work. Why should I even do that? Who cares about that stuff? That stuff's not real. The Buddha didn't really live. You'll maybe lack confidence in the Buddha, confidence in his teachings, confidence in this community, confidence in your teacher, confidence in your own ability to attain enlightenment. Do you even have the ability to attain enlightenment? You might think that you're incapable of learning and actually accomplishing this. You might notice that you continue to search for a spiritual life and/or teachers, that you bounce around from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher because you haven't soaked into the teachings of the Buddha deeply enough to see that they're true. So you'll end up bouncing around from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher because you haven't found what works yet. And your mind is doubting whether the teachings actually work. You might notice that you're judging your teacher and looking at every last little thing that they're doing and try to find one little sliver of hope that maybe they're not enlightened or maybe they don't actually really know the teachings and they can't really guide you to enlightenment. Or you might be looking at your own development of your practice and realize that or thinking that you can't actually get to this enlightened mental state. So you might be judging yourself about every last little thing that you're doing. You might notice that you're argumentative towards your teacher or other members in the community, that rather than asking questions of clarification to be able to gain understanding of the teachings, you might notice that you have argumentative speech and you're confrontational and you want to challenge your teacher. This is what happens when there's doubt in the mind. So this is what doubt is, and this is the symptoms of doubt. Do you guys have any questions on any of this? No? Okay. So now here's how you eliminate it, or the solutions or remedies to get rid of doubt. It's not through blind belief or faith. you never should believe anything related to the teachings of the Buddha. The way you eliminate doubt is you investigate the teachings. You examine them, investigating them. You learn them. By learning the teachings and not believing them, then you reflect on the teachings to independently verify them. And then you start practicing the teachings. And this is how you acquire wisdom. And as you acquire this wisdom, you'll notice that as you implement these teachings in your practice, that they work to eradicate these pollutions, and you'll see more and more improved qualities of your mind starting to shine through. You'll see situations where once you were angry or frustrated or agitated, that you're no longer experiencing that you're quite peaceful in those situations. Because you know, in situations where you typically get agitated or annoyed, and you try to avoid those situations as best you can, but you can't avoid those situations. It's only a matter of time before you experience something where you would have typically got angry or frustrated, and now you experience that same situation and you don't experience that anymore. You notice that your mind's quite calm and quite peaceful, and you'll know that it's these teachings that have led you to that point because you've been dedicated to learn them, to reflect on them, to practice them. And you'll see in situations where maybe you would argue with your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister, you're not arguing anymore. You're just calm and peaceful, and you're able to walk away from things. You don't notice the frustration and agitation and annoyance arising in the mind. You'll notice in situations where you're not shy anymore, where the resentment is starting to peel away. You'll notice that you're not bored and lonely, that you can maintain your joy. So you'll start noticing these qualities of mind through learning things like the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the meditation training, the natural law of karma, all these different teachings that you learned as part of the foundational teachings. As you're putting together those foundational teachings, and then you start experiencing the jhanas, and the qualities of mind that you're experiencing is exactly what the Buddha described to you and what I shared with you, you'll start noticing, oh my goodness, this person spoke these words 2,500 years ago about the mental states that I'm going to experience when I get into the jhanas. And it was shared with me to practice the Eightfold Path to get into the jhanas. I did that, and here I am experiencing those exact qualities that the Buddha said I would experience over 2,500 years ago. He spoke these words, and here I am experiencing those exact qualities. You'll get to the point where you have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind. By the time you eliminate doubt, you won't actually be enlightened yet, but you will have seen enough progress in the condition of the mind that you will know that these teachings are indeed leading to an improved condition of mind and an improved condition of your life. What you're doing is you're building confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. Through learning, reflecting, and practicing the teachings, this is going to help you to build that confidence that you can see the condition of the mind is gradually improving. And this is how you know that you're headed in the right direction, because you'll notice that this doubt is starting to slowly diminish. Initially, people typically have doubt. I know I did. Rather than avoid that and kind of think that you don't have doubt, or try to think that you have, or try to convert that through blind faith or blind belief, don't do that. What I would encourage you to do is harness this doubt. Say, yeah, you know what? I do have doubt whether this person, the Buddha, lived. I do have doubt whether his teachings are true and real and if they lead to enlightenment. Maybe you do have doubt about this community. Maybe you do have doubt about your teacher. Maybe you do have doubt about whether you can get to enlightenment or not. And if you have that doubt, you can actually harness it. Create an inquisitive mind and be like, yes, I do doubt the teachings of the Buddha. And you know what? I'm going to investigate these teachings. I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to dig in and see if these teachings truly work or not. Oftentimes what doubt does is someone will turn away from the teachings of the Buddha. They'll kind of push the teachings away and they'll walk in a different direction and be like, those things don't work. I'm just going to go over here and do something else. I'm just going to keep killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants. None of that stuff is working for someone's life. It's leading to all kinds of problems in their life. But oftentimes the mind is complacent and it's not interested to learn and roll up the sleeves. So if you have doubt, like I did when I first came to the path to enlightenment, I suggest that you harness it. That's what I did. I was like, yeah, I do doubt these teachings. And I rolled up my sleeves, I dug in, and I investigated them, examined them. And then that's where you can see that they lead exactly where the Buddha said they do, to this enlightened mental state. So you can harness this doubt in a positive way and help you to be able to get to this enlightened mental state where ultimately you'll eliminate the doubt, because you're going to see improvement to the condition of the mind as you're progressing forward. The way that you'll know that you've eliminated any doubt is that you'll have what's called confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to attain enlightenment. What confirmed confidence is say you're out and about somewhere. Let's just say you're at immigration and you're sitting down and somebody next to you says, hey, there's all these Buddhist temples in Chiang Mai, have you been to any of these? You're like, yeah, I've been to some of the temples. Like, well, what do you think about that? By the time you have eliminated doubt, you will know these teachings lead exactly where the Buddha says, and you would be able to confidently say, oh yeah, these teachings work for sure. If you learn them, they'll surely work. Or whatever you end up saying, right? It's your own personality, however you would like to say anything. But if you have eliminated doubt, you'll have seen a certain amount of progress in your mind. And no matter what somebody says to you, whether it's a family member or somebody you've never met before, if they're asking you questions about the teachings of the Buddha, you'll be confirmed in your confidence. You'll be able to confidently say, oh yeah, these teachings indeed lead to an improved condition of mind and improved condition of life, because you will have seen that progress in your mind. When you'll know that doubt is eliminated, that you'll have deeply investigated the teachings of the Buddha, and you'll have been seen these significant improvements to the condition of the mind in your life. And this comes through learning, reflecting, and practicing the teachings. You'll no longer be in search of a spiritual life by the time your doubt is eliminated, because you will have found it. You would have known that you've been maybe bouncing around different places to try to figure out where you might decide to learn and practice. But eventually, if you've found the true teachings of the Buddha and you've investigated them and you've examined them and you've seen the improvement to the condition of your mind, you won't be enlightened yet, but you won't no longer be in search of a spiritual life. You won't be in search of a teacher. You'll know that you found what it is that you need. You'll have 100% certainty in the teachings that you're learning is leading to your enlightenment. Again, you're not enlightened yet, but you'll know that they're leading to your enlightenment. And there's just a matter of continuing to learn and develop the mind. So you'll no longer be out there searching and looking and trying to find out, where can I learn how to get to enlightenment, because you'll know you have found it. And it's just a matter of time of continuing to do that work before you actually get to enlightenment. So any questions on any of this? Yes. And I think I have some more here as well. Yeah, let me just talk about these. By the time you eliminate doubt, you will never give up on the development of your life practice. You will just continue to make improvement, getting to enlightenment, through solely studying the teachings of the Buddha. Sometimes people study the teachings of the Buddha and they're also dabbling in other things as well, maybe Hinduism or other things like this. And it's not that by you eliminating doubt, like I'm telling you that you shouldn't explore those things. If you would like to explore Hinduism or Christianity or any of these other things, go explore it, go do those things. But by the time you've investigated the teachings of the Buddha deeply enough, you won't give up on your journey to enlightenment, because you will have seen those jhanas and you would have seen the progress to the condition of your mind, that there's no way that you would give up on getting to enlightenment. That's why by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, having eliminated doubt, you are going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Either in this life or some subsequent life, you're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time, because you're locked in and you know that it's these teachings that are leading to your enlightenment. So you're not going to be out there searching for other teachers and dabbling in other things, because that's just going to dilute your ability to purely focus on the teachings of the Buddha. But if that's where you're at now, if you need to look at other videos or podcasts or go to other places and learn different things, go do those things. But eventually, by the time you deeply investigate the words of the Buddha and the teachings of the Buddha, and you've seen the progress, you'll give up on all of those things, because you'll know that what you're currently learning with the words of the Buddha is actually working. You will have significantly reduced complacency from the mind. You won't have eradicated 100%, but by the time you eliminate your doubt, you will have significantly reduced your complacency, that you're no longer dull or lethargic about learning and practicing these teachings. You'll have energy and enthusiasm and motivation to continue to learn. You'll be able to have deep respect and politeness towards the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and your teacher, because you'll know that progress that you experienced is because of these things. If it wasn't for the Buddha doing all that hard work for 45 years, from the age of 35 to 80, to share his teachings in the world, you wouldn't have been able to learn those teachings and experience the significant progress that you have experienced at this point, and you would have deep respect for the Buddha and everything that he did during his life. You would have deep respect towards his teachings. You would have deep respect for this community, because not only are you learning from a teacher, but you're learning from other members of the community too. Like when we go out on excursions or when you're spending time with people and you're like, oh, wow, I really like how Ryan offered to get the menu for Victoria at the Hua Tung Tao yesterday. He was so generous and just saying, hey, I'll go get the menu for you so you can look at the dessert. And then he kind of hung out and he was willing to take your order and go take your order. That's generosity. It's like, oh, wow, I really admire that. You'll see these kinds of things amongst the members of the community. And you're like, wow, I'd like to do some more of that. That was really admirable. Or if you see other people doing things in the community, you might decide like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I like how they're practicing that teaching of generosity or loving kindness or compassion. And you might bring that on board. So it's not just your teacher that's helping you get to enlightenment. It's the members of the community that you can observe certain qualities that they're practicing. And this is one of the reasons why it's so beneficial to be learning these teachings in a place like Thailand, and particularly Chiang Mai, Thailand, because you've got millions of practitioners around you that are practicing these teachings. When you go into a restaurant and you're eating and they bring you a free plate of fruit at the end of your meal, this is them practicing generosity. And you can see these teachings all over the place, because it's one thing to learn in a classroom like this, but it's a whole other thing to go out into the practice the teachings. So when you're surrounded by other members of the community who are practicing the teachings, either our direct community who comes here or the community at large, which is all the Thai people around us who are practicing, this is how you can glean insight to be able to better inform your practice and then put these teachings into practice more and more, because you see how other people have implemented them into your life. So by living in a place like this, and even visiting a place like this from time to time, you'll be able to absorb the teachings in such a way that even when you go back to your home country, you'll be able to practice them more readily because you've seen how they've been practiced here. One of the things that I used to do when I came here to Thailand is, before I was really learning and practicing these, I would notice how Thai people are smiling all the time and they're so joyful and so cheerful and these kinds of things. That kind of rubs off on you after a while when you're here. It kind of influences your mind. And then I would end up going back to the country that I came from, which was America. And I would oftentimes get into an elevator after having came from Thailand, and I would get into the elevator and I would see a woman there and I would smile to her and I would hit the button for the floor that I'm going to. That's not normally something that happens in America. If there's a woman in an elevator by herself and you smile at her, she'll sometimes get fearful, thinking that you're going to take advantage of her or do something that is unwise. And I would see that they would kind of shudder when I would smile at them. And then I would stop doing that because I felt like, I wasn't interested in causing this person to do that. But that was because of my lack of wisdom, that I wasn't causing that person to shudder. So I would adjust what I was doing when I went to America, rather than maintain the joy, rather than maintain that brightness and radiance that I had here. I would oftentimes change and modify what I was doing in an unwise way. But then once I started realizing the teachings of the Buddha, that I didn't cause that person to get scared, I didn't cause that person to be fearful, I then started maintaining my practice, whether I was here in Thailand or whether I was in America. So even when I would get into the elevator and I would smile, every once in a while the person would smile back, but more likely they're not going to smile back to me. And that's okay, because I don't have an expectation that they would smile back. And I know if they got scared or fearful, I didn't cause that. So when you're learning from your community, whether it's this community or the community at large, and then you go back to your home country and they do things differently, be sure that you're not adopting and conforming to that unwise or unenlightened way of the way things happen in your particular home country or any other country that you visit. So even though other people might be bitter and harsh and hostile, or maybe they might be shy or fearful or these other things, that doesn't mean you need to do that. So in a situation where you get into an elevator and you smile at somebody, if they shudder in fear, that's up to them. That's what they're choosing to do. Your practice is that you're going to be joyful and polite and respectful to everybody around you. And you can gain this insight and wisdom from looking to the members of the community around you, seeing how things happen here in Thailand. And then whenever you travel anywhere in the world, you can continue to function that way and notice that this can be very helpful for you to brighten up your mind. So having deep respect and politeness towards the community that you're part of is something that you would have after having eliminated doubt, because you will have seen and learned from this community, not just your teacher, but from the community, and you'd have deep respect for the members of the community that you're a part of. And then you'd also have deep respect for your teacher, because by the time you get to the elimination of doubt, you would have already experienced the jhanas and starting to head into that first stage of enlightenment. You would have noticed this significant reduction in your discontentedness, and you would know that it's your teacher that's helped you to be able to accomplish that. So you would have deep respect for that person. And these are some of the things that you would know that you are experiencing once you've eliminated the doubt about the teachings. So it looks like Karen has a question. Go ahead, Karen.
I know in some traditions there's this ritual of taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and then you're assigned a name, and it's usually connected to a particular teacher. So I'm just kind of curious. It's been offered to me several times, particularly in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but it never felt quite authentic for me. So that's a doubt about something about that particular teaching, or whether or not that's a ritual that's very specific to that tradition. So I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, this one's going to be covered in the next fetter that we talk about, but we can talk about it here a little bit. The Buddha never taught that. That's a ceremony, that's a ritual that people do, a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship. The Buddha never taught any of those things, but nowadays people do those things. This is a ceremony that you can request from an ordained practitioner. It's called taking refuge, where you basically, go to some event and, they have you basically commit that you are now taking refuge in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And you can read in the teachings of the Buddha where there are sometimes people that would come up to him. He'd be walking from one town to the other. He'd be walking down the street, and somebody would come up to him and be pleading with him like they would like to become a student of the Buddha. And he would just step off to the side of the road, have them shave off their hair, put on a robe, and just follow him to the next town. That's what he did, right? So there wasn't some elaborate ceremony that needed to be hosted at this particular temple in order for someone to be a student of his. But now, 2,500 years later, there's people that do these kinds of things. So you don't need to do that kind of thing. So the fact that you didn't do it, that's fine. You can still get to enlightenment. You don't need that kind of thing to get to enlightenment or to eliminate your doubt. What eliminates your doubt is truly investigating the teachings and examining them and seeing the real results that they produce. That's how you eliminate your doubt, because you see the focus and concentration, the deep memory. You see your personal and professional relationships blossom. You see situations where you would have normally got angry or mad or frustrated or irritated, and you're not that anymore. You see longer and longer periods of time where you're in a good mood. And then when you do have certain discontent feelings, they don't last as long. They're very insignificant and they're short-lived, and you can kind of eliminate them out of the mind more readily. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're always in a good mood and you don't experience any discontentedness. But by the time you eliminate doubt, you're not quite enlightened yet, but you will have seen significant progress where your discontentedness is significantly diminished. But you don't need these kind of ceremonies to be able to accomplish that. Okay, I don't see any other questions here. So I'm going to now move on to the next one. which is eliminating the pollution of wrong behavior and observances. This is mastering moral conduct and eliminating superstition. This is the third fetter. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing, explain to you what it is. I'm going to explain to you the symptoms. I'm going to explain to you how to eliminate it. And then I'm going to explain to you how to know that you've eliminated it. So wrong behavior and observances. This is actually two aspects to this fetter. What wrong behavior and observances is the unwholesome moral conduct and the mind's belief that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship will help a practitioner to attain enlightenment. So separating this out, the symptoms of wrong behavior is that an individual will not be practicing the right speech, right action, and right livelihood from the Eightfold Path. That's where you learned under right speech, where the Buddha talked about eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And you're learning to eliminate these because of understanding the natural law of karma. They're not rules or commandments. It's understanding that when you lie, people are going to discover those lies. They're going to see that you're not dependable, that you're not trustworthy, and it's going to affect you in unwholesome ways. When we make unwise decisions, it's going to produce unwholesome results. And when we make wise decisions, it will produce wholesome results. So if we're making the unwise decision to lie, not only are people going to discover our lies and find us to be undependable and untrustworthy, and now that's going to affect us in our personal professional life because people aren't going to be willing to associate with us and give us projects that could improve our life. But also, if you're lying, your mind's got to keep your lies straight. You got to figure out, what did you lie to this person? What did you lie to this person? What did you say to this person? And now you've got to sort all that out. And your mind's not going to be peaceful and joyful trying to sort all that out. So if you can just speak the truth, then this is going to produce wholesome results in your life, that people will find you dependable and trustworthy. And now your personal, professional relationships can thrive and they can really grow. And your mind doesn't have to be overactive. So this right speech, where you're learning to not lie, this is going to help you to be able to produce that peaceful and joyful mind in life and live harmoniously with all beings. If you are slandering, this is the gossip and the diminishing of people, organizations, a company, or a culture or a country, something like this. If you're slandering or gossiping people, you're damaging their reputation. And now when you're injuring those people, that's an unwise decision, because now they're going to be interested in injuring you. You know, I'm not saying that this is what the way things should be, but the way things are is that when you gossip and slander people, they're going to try to hurt you, right? And the people have even gotten murdered over this. You can see journalists that go out and do investigative reporting and they expose certain corruptions, and now people get murdered for those kinds of things. And I'm not saying you should or should not do those things, but understanding the natural law of karma, you can see the results of what's truly happening. So if you're interested in making wise decisions that produces wholesome results, you're going to need to understand this natural law of karma and then practice in such a way where you're making wise decisions. So gossiping and slander will lead to this unwholesome result of people potentially being interested to injure you or murder you or hurt you in some particular way. And at the very least, if you're gossiping and slandering about people, they're going to gossip and slander about you. If you're around people and you're gossiping in your little cliques, when you turn your back, they're going to gossip about you, because everybody's been learning to gossip and slander each other. And now when you're away, they're going to gossip and slander you. So if you're not interested in people gossiping and slandering about you, you need to stop gossiping and slandering other people. And then harsh speech is your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, how you choose to interact with people. If you can look at your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, this will help you to relate to people in harmonious ways. That oftentimes when you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, you might struggle with your tone, your tempo, and your word choice in certain conversations. And now when you're talking aggressive and harsh and bitter and hostile, this comes back to you. So if you can learn to speak gentle, this will improve your relationships. And then the fourth aspect of right speech is eliminating frivolous speech or idle chatter. This is where you might just go yada 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 yada. This is like just constant talk. I consider it broadcasting. It's not a conversation. It's broadcasting. If you've ever done that, or if you've ever been around someone who's done that, probably been like, oh my goodness, when is this person going to stop talking? Oh my goodness, right? It's almost like harming somebody. Where this is coming from is this is your own craving, desire, attachment to talk and talk and talk. It's unbeneficial, unpurposeful speech. So by the time you've eliminated wrong speech and you're practicing right speech from the Eightfold Path, you will no longer be lying, you will no longer be slandering and gossiping, you'll no longer have harsh speech, and you'll no longer have frivolous speech. And then there's deeper teachings on right speech, like the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, which I teach in all the different programs and in the books and stuff like that, that goes deeper into right speech. But in order to eliminate this particular fetter, you need to practice right speech at the level that's in the Eightfold Path, eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And what this is helping you do is not only make wise decisions that's going to produce wholesome results, so you can eliminate those unwise decisions that's producing unwholesome results, but it's helping you eliminate craving, desire, attachment. Because remember, in the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha is explaining the cause of discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment. He explains this in the Second Noble Truth. But by the time he gets to the Fourth Noble Truth, he explains the way to eliminate discontentedness is to practice the Eightfold Path. So everything on the Eightfold Path is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. If you're lying, there's typically a craving, desire, attachment there that the mind has. If you look at any of the lies that you've told, there's something that you wanted, and you felt like if you told the truth, you wouldn't be able to get what you want. So you lied in order to get what you want. And the same thing is true with slander and gossip. Oftentimes people are trying to diminish other people in order to improve themselves. There's some craving, desire, attachment there potentially with the slander and the gossip. Even in a situation where somebody's maybe trying to be an investigative reporter in order to expose corruption in a community, there's a certain craving, desire, attachment there that's underlying that. And the same thing with harsh speech. With harsh speech, there's craving, desire, attachment that's motivating that. And the same thing with frivolous speech as well. There's a craving, desire, attachment that's motivating that. So by practicing right speech, it's not about conforming to any rules or commandments. It's about making wise decisions that produce wholesome results. And it's about eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And then the same thing with right action. That's another part of this wrong behavior. That right action is to eliminate the killing, the stealing, and the sexual misconduct. And you get more details on that in the 5 precepts where the Buddha fully explains that for you. And I walked you guys through that and showed you how to apply it in given situations. So you saw that it's not necessarily black and white in all situations, that you need to be able to navigate this world through these natural laws and understanding the 5 precepts in that big gray area. So by the time someone's eliminated wrong action, they will be not causing harm to their bodily actions in terms of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct based on navigating that gray area that we talked about in the 5 precepts. And then understanding that right action is more so about not causing any harm through your bodily actions. If you've been around Thai people any amount of time, you might notice how they're very observant about their body as they walk through a crowd or they walk into a certain place. Even like their baggy clothing, they will kind of hold it against their body as they walk through a particular area to make sure that their baggy clothing doesn't even touch somebody. They're very intentionally walking through a crowd, ensuring that they're not bumping into each other, right? This is the way that people walk when they understand right action, that they're very observant about their bodily and they're not just flailing around and kind of bumping into others. But of course, you're probably going to occasionally bump into somebody and you just apologize and you say sorry. That's a way to clean that up, right? So by the time you eliminate wrong behavior, you've practicing right action where you're not causing any harm through your bodily actions. Intentional harm. Of course, if you're walking down the street and you're going to lunch and there's an ant that comes under your foot and you didn't even know it was there and it gets crushed, that wasn't your intentional harm. You didn't intentionally cause that harm. This right action is also to help you eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And it's also to help you eliminate ill will as well. right action by not causing harm through killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. In order to kill, steal, and have sexual misconduct, there needs to be a certain amount of craving in the mind. So this is helping you to reduce and eliminate cravings by eliminating killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. It's helping you to practice wholesome, wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. There also needs to be a certain amount of ill will in the mind, be able to kill, steal, and have sexual misconduct. So you're eliminating those two fetters of sensual desire and ill will. Whenever we talk about craving, desire, attachment, this comes back to the fetter of sensual desire, which is the fourth fetter out of the 10 fetters. So these teachings on the Eightfold Path and even the 5 precepts are helping you to eliminate these fetters in one way or another. Then you've got right livelihood, which is part of the moral conduct section, where the Buddha is teaching you not to cause harm through the way that you sustain your life, where he teaches you to eliminate the businesses in poisons and meat in living beings and substances that cause heedlessness and weapons. That if you're selling any of these things or you're taking part in businesses where there's weapons being sold, where there's meat, where there's living beings, where there's substances that cause heedlessness or poisons, these are designed to cause harm to others. So you would be sustaining your life based on causing harm to others. And there needs to be a certain amount of craving for money, and there needs to be a certain amount of ill will if somebody's basing their livelihood and their life off of these things. So by cleaning up your moral conduct around your livelihood, it's helping you to, again, eliminate craving, desire, attachment, that sensual desire. It's helping you to eliminate ill will. And then remember, the Buddha teaches about how to conduct our livelihood, that we're not scheming, we're not belittling, we're not hinting, we're not pursuing gain with gain. These are all ways to practice the moral conduct section of right livelihood. And here, when you're practicing that moral conduct section of right livelihood, you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment, and ill will. All of this is designed to shut down the harm that you're causing to other beings. If you're interested in cleaning up your conduct and cleaning up your moral conduct and getting to the point where you've cleaned up your karma, the results of your decisions, then by shutting down any kind of harmful moral conduct, this is going to help you to be able to now experience wholesome results coming back to you. As long as you're causing harm through your speech, your actions, or your livelihood, that harm's going to come back to you. So one of the things that the Buddha would do with a brand new student is he would start them off with right view, understanding the Four Noble Truths, where they could understand that their mind is causing their own discontentedness. And that's what I start out students with when they first get started as well. But then the very next thing that he would teach them is the moral conduct. Because if you're interested in cleaning up your karma, cleaning up your life, cleaning up your mind, you're going to need to improve the way that you interact with other beings through your speech or actions and your livelihood. As long as you're causing harm through your speech, actions, or livelihood, this harm is going to just keep coming back to you. So the sooner that you can shut down any harmful moral conduct, the less unwholesome results that you're going to need to experience, because it's all going to come back to you. You can't escape it. So here, by the time someone's eliminated wrong behavior, they're practicing that first level of teaching through right speech, right action, and right livelihood in the Eightfold Path, which is what I just described to you in summary form. And it's documented in the teachings of the Buddha through his own words. So you can see that first level of detail. But then understand under each one of these, whether it's right speech, right action, or right livelihood, there's deeper teachings. But in order to eliminate this particular fetter, you just need to be practicing at that level that's described in the Eightfold Path. And then the connected teachings that come into it, that's what you continue to tweak and you continue to deepen as you move beyond the first stage of enlightenment. But in order to get to this first stage, you would need to eliminate wrong behavior, which is those right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And that's going to shut down the unwholesome results that you're experiencing. The other part of this fetter of wrong behavior and observances is the wrong observances. This is where by the time you eliminate wrong observances, there's no way that you could see that a right ritual, ceremony, or worship is actually going to lead to enlightenment. That what this particular fetter is that an individual believes that a right ritual, ceremony, or worship is going to somehow produce some kind of enlightened mental state. So if you're going into an environment, whether it's Buddhist or otherwise, where they're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, right away you know the people in that environment aren't even in the first stage of enlightenment. And if they're not in the first stage of enlightenment, how could they ever guide you to enlightenment, right? In order for somebody to be able to guide you to enlightenment, they would either need to be enlightened or very close to enlightenment. If somebody's not even in the first stage of enlightenment in their teaching, it would be very difficult for them to ever help anybody get to enlightenment. Even the Buddha says this himself, that it would be very difficult for anybody to ever help you get to enlightenment if they're not even in the first stage of enlightenment. The Buddha says, if you're not enlightened, it would be very difficult for you to ever lead anybody to enlightenment. So if someone's not in the first stage of enlightenment, they surely would have a difficult time ever helping anyone get to enlightenment, because it's the same kind of thing. Like if you were looking to have somebody teach you how to drive a car, if somebody's never, ever, ever driven a car before, would you go to that person and ask them to teach you how to drive a car? Probably not, right? You'd probably like to go to somebody who's been driving a car for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and maybe even teaching for 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. And now that's the person you'd like to learn from about how to drive a car. So if you go into an environment and they're calling it Buddhist and they're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, right away you know that they haven't gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, and you need to decide, would it be wise for you to learn in that environment, because they're sharing things that are completely opposite of the teachings of the Buddha, which are these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So if someone has wrong observances, they're going to consider that these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship are important in order to get to enlightenment. And they haven't understood the core central teaching of the Buddha, which is dependent origination, which I taught to you guys yesterday. So here, sorry for you guys on live stream, I wasn't showing the slides. So here, I'm just going to explain the solutions here to help you guys understand. The solutions to eliminating wrong behavior and observances is that you develop this practice of the Eightfold Path where you're practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Understanding that moral conduct section really clearly, not as rules and commandments, as I always share. Understand it through the natural law of Gamma, of cause and effect, or action and result. Why should I not lie? Why should I not slander? Why should I not have harsh speech? Why should I not have frivolous speech? Why is that important? See the cause and effect. See the wise decision-making that leads to wholesome results, and see the unwise decision-making that leads to the unwholesome results. And you can use your own life to be able to see that, and you can even look in the world around you to see that as well, because these natural laws are affecting people whether they're aware of it or not. So this is where, if you can directly reflect on your own experiences of having lied, had slander, harsh speech, or frivolous speech, you can see how it's impacted you in an unwholesome way. But if you haven't experienced any of those things, if you haven't done any of those things to be able to have those experiences, look at other people's lives. This is where the news comes in really nicely. What the news is, they're reporting the happenings of the natural law of Gamma. That's what that is. That's sharing with you what's happening in the world. And this is the natural law of Gamma taking front and center stage and showing you what's going on in the world. That's a reporting on the natural law of Gamma. And the same thing with right action. Look at right action: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. If you've ever done those things, or if you look around the world and see people that have done those things, you can see that it leads to unwholesome results. And in situations where you're not doing those things, you can see where it leads to wholesome results. And the same thing with your livelihood too. Those 5 livelihoods of selling weapons, meat, living beings, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. You can reflect on each one of those and see how it leads to unwholesome results. Where you have difficulties doing those things, you reach out to your teacher and I will help you see how to independently verify that. And the same thing with the scheming, the belittling, the hinting, the flattery, the pursuing gain with gain. That's where the Buddha talks about how to conduct your livelihood, that it would be unwise to have scheming or flattery or belittling or hinting or pursuing gain with gain. This is how you conduct your livelihood. If you've done those things, then you'll see that they lead to unwholesome results. But if you haven't done those, you can look around the world around you of other people who are doing those things. Maybe you went to a business where they were trying to flatter you into buying, and they were having insincere comments, and you were like, I really don't want to buy anything from this place. And you might have walked out. Right? And you can see that the teachings of the Buddha are true related to these teachings. So you can independently verify this and develop your practice really well. And as you're developing your practice really well, you'll see the improvements to the condition of your life and the condition of your mind by practicing this moral conduct. And you will eliminate the belief that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship are going to lead to an improved condition of mind. And the dependent origination is a good way to help you do that, because you understand in dependent origination what the real problem is. So it's this eightfold path, this moral conduct section of right speech, right action, right livelihood that the Buddha is talking about here with wrong behavior. Okay? And now, the way that you eliminate this wrong observances is understand the difference between belief and wisdom. Okay, what belief is you don't know whether it's true or false. If you're just believing something, you don't know what's necessarily true and what's false, or what's right or wrong, or what's wise or unwise. The mind is just believing it. The mind is clinging to a certain perception. Remember those 5 aggregates that I taught yesterday. What a perception is your views and opinions of the world, where you look out at the world and you're viewing the world through the way things seem to be, rather than true reality. That's what a perception is. It's like an assumption. So you're not interested in clinging to any kind of perception, because what a perception is a belief or opinion of the way how things seem to be. But what you're interested in getting to is the truth and to wisdom. When you get to wisdom, it's independently verifiable. Whatever wisdom you have, it's independently verifiable. You can independently verify things like the 3 universal truths, or the 4 noble truths, or the Eightfold Path, or the 5 precepts. I've shown you guys how to learn something, how to reflect on it, and how to practice it to be able to independently verify that this thing is true. So by the time you get to wisdom, it's an independently verifiable truth, and you will know that, and your mind will be unshakable on that truth. If you ever grew up believing in Santa Claus, at one time you believed in Santa Claus. You had this belief that Santa Claus existed. And then when you found out that Santa Claus didn't exist, your mind was all shaken up. Perhaps, I know mine was. I was really shaken up at 8 years old when I found out Santa Claus didn't exist. And I was really mad at my parents for lying to me, right? And your mind gets, frustrated and angry during that period of time. Well, once you get to wisdom that you know Santa Claus doesn't exist, it doesn't matter how many red suits and big overweight men you see at the mall with gray hair, or whether you hear a Christmas carol about Rudolph and all these different reindeer, or how many movies you see that have Santa Claus in it, you know that that's not a true story, that Santa Claus doesn't exist today, right? You know with wisdom. Your mind is unshakable. It doesn't matter how many people try to convince you that Santa Claus exists, your mind's unshakable. Nobody can convince you otherwise. Well, that's the same thing that you need to do with all of these teachings of the Buddha. Get to the point where when you read the 5 precepts, your mind's unshakable. You know that it's 100% unwise to do any of those things that the Buddha talks about in terms of the Eightfold Path and the 4 Noble Truths, that you can independently verify that. And there's not a shadow of doubt in your mind that every time your mind gets discontent, it's because of craving, desire, attachment. You need to get to the point where your mind's unshakable on that. You've seen the wisdom so closely that you know that nobody else is causing your mind to be discontent. This is how you get to wisdom. You got to penetrate into it very closely. And then that truth that you've learned is independently verifiable in its wisdom, and your mind will no longer be able to be shaken off of that. It doesn't matter what somebody says. So that's why when somebody asks me questions, I can just answer it right away. Like sometimes people ask me, David, what's up with this law of attraction? Is that thing real, or what's going on with that law of attraction? I can tell people absolutely not. There's no such thing as a law of attraction. This is trying to will something into the world, manifesting something into the world. The way everything happens in the world is through cause and effect and action and result. If you want more money and more wealth, you're going to need to go get more skills. You're going to need to go get a job. You're going to need to make a bunch of decisions that lead to that more wealth. You can't just manifest something into the world through thinking about it and having affirmations to think about something and just will it into the world in terms of, I want more money, or I want a bigger house, or I want more friends. This isn't possible. Every single thing that happens is through cause and effect. So the more that you penetrate into the teachings, you can see that the teachings are true, you've independently verified them, you got to wisdom, and when somebody asks you a question about something, you'll be able to understand that question and answer it very easily because you've seen the truth very clearly for yourself. So getting to wisdom is to independently verify something, and you'll have 100% confidence in what you've learned because you've independently verified all of these different teachings. This is how you get to wisdom about something like rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. If you've done enough of the rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, maybe in Buddhist tradition or in other traditions that are teaching rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, you've seen that it doesn't lead to an improved life or an improved condition of mind. It doesn't matter how much water somebody sprinkles on you, how many strings they tie on your wrist, how many wafers you put on your tongue. No matter what, you get holy water at a church and put that on you. Okay, that was fresh, some nice water, but it didn't improve the condition of your mind. It didn't get you to wisdom. Because now what I'd like to share with you guys is I'd like to ask you these questions and see if you can answer this, because you might be able to eliminate the wrong observances part of this fetter right here by answering these questions. What's the number one and primary problem that is keeping the mind in the unenlightened state and in the cycle of rebirth? Does anybody know the answer to this? Craving is what's causing the mind to be discontent. But why is craving there? Why does craving exist? Ignorance, right? Ignorance is the number one primary problem. That's discovered in dependent origination. If you guys remember dependent origination, that the only reason why craving exists is because of the unknowing of true reality, the delusion, the confusion, the misunderstanding. Okay? So what solves the problem of ignorance or the unknowing of true reality? What's the antidote to that? Wisdom, right? Wisdom's the antidote to that. And I just taught you guys how to get to wisdom, is that you need to independently verify something. How do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship help a practitioner to transform ignorance? It doesn't, right? It can't get you to wisdom. Rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship can't get you to wisdom. This is why the Buddha never taught rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, because it doesn't get you to wisdom. It can't antidote ignorance, right? So what rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship will help a practitioner to transform the problem of ignorance? None will help you. There's no rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship that's going to help you eliminate ignorance. There's nothing that's going to help you cultivate wisdom through rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And this is why the Buddha never taught it, right? But you'll see people doing this in lots of different places, even attributing it to Buddhist teachings. You can go to Buddhist temples and they'll be doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. But if you understand dependent origination, which is the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha, the highest natural law, he shows you where ignorance is the number one problem. That very top line, ignorance is the number one problem. And the way to antidote that is to get to wisdom. And this is why he never taught rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. Now, if you're at home, you're with your relatives, maybe on Christmas Eve, New Year's, they decide to go to church and you're hanging out with them, go to church, hang out with your family if that's what you'd like to do. Maybe they go up to the altar, maybe they get their wafer, their wine, whatever they're doing, right? That's up to them. If your mind knows that this doesn't lead to enlightenment, then you've eliminated wrong observances, right? It's not like you go to church and you're participating in that kind of event and you're going to wither away like the Wicked Witch of the West in Wizard of Oz, if you've ever seen that movie. It's not like if you go to a temple and a monk happens to throw some water on you, you have wrong observances. It's all about what's going on in the mind, right? I've been to some temples recently where I was teaching students about how the sprinkling of water isn't going to lead to enlightenment. And while we were sitting there talking, the monk started sprinkling water on everybody, right? So it's not like just because you get the water sprinkled on you, all of a sudden you have wrong observances. It's about what's going on in your mind. So if you're hanging out with your family or your friends and you want to go to the synagogue or the mosque or the church and hang out as a family, go have fun if that's what you're going to do. But you just know in your mind, any of these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship that they're doing, it's not going to lead you to wisdom and improved condition of mind. That's what it means to eliminate wrong observances. Okay, so you need to deeply understand that in your mind. So just keep in mind that belief does not lead to wisdom and does not lead to awakening the mind to enlightenment. There's nothing auspicious or superstitious about the path to enlightenment. The Buddha says this in his own words. He explains that there's nothing auspicious or superstitious about his path. It's purely to learn wisdom and now train your mind through practicing teachings and uprooting certain pollutions in the mind. The goal and objective of the path to enlightenment is to acquire wisdom. This is what antidotes, remedies, or transforms the ignorance, this unknowing of true reality. And you get to that through independent verification of the teachings. That's why from day one, when a student starts to learn with me, I spend time to make sure that you don't believe anything that I say. You don't believe anything I write in books. You don't believe anything that anybody says. You learn it, reflect on it, and practice it. Because even though you didn't learn dependent origination on the first day that you started learning with me, I knew where I was guiding you. I was guiding you to understanding dependent origination. I was guiding you to cultivate wisdom because I know that that's what it's going to take for you to awaken your mind. So that's why I have that talk with you on the very first day that students typically learn with me, is I will have that talk with you to help you understand to not believe anything that I say or anything that I teach you, that you're on your own independent journey to get to enlightenment. You've got to discover the truth for yourself, and you can't get to truth through belief. So nothing in the teachings of the Buddha should ever be believed. There's no rites or rituals or ceremonies or worship that's going to lead to wisdom. So never believe anything at all. You're always looking for the truth. And when you get to the truth, you'll acquire wisdom. And the process of doing that is through learning, to reflect, to independently verify, and you're practicing. And then as you're uprooting these pollutions and you see the condition of the mind improving, you'll know the truth, that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of your mind. So this particular fetter is also helping you to eliminate doubt as well. By you practicing eliminating wrong behavior and wrong observances, the condition of your mind is going to be gradually improving, and that's what's going to help you eliminate doubt as well. That's why these are collected together. These three fetters need to be eliminated to get to the first stage of enlightenment. You need to eliminate personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. And then you'll be able to get into that first stage of enlightenment. And it just takes you time to get into that. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to notice the significant decrease in the discontentedness that you were once experiencing. So this is how you'll know that wrong behavior and observance is eliminated from the mind. With wrong behavior, you'll deeply understand and be able to explain right speech, right action, and right livelihood. As you saw, I'm able to explain right speech, right action, and right livelihood without even looking at a visual aid, without looking at the book. I can explain to you exactly what right speech, right action, right livelihood is from memory. Because by the time you are practicing the teachings very closely, you would have had to bring them in intellectually, understood them, and then practice them. You would have needed to tweak these very closely. So if anybody asked you, hey, what did the Buddha teach on right speech? You'd be able to easily say, if you've eliminated wrong behavior, you would easily be able to say, oh, he taught to eliminate lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. You know that right off the cuff. You know it cold. And then, oh, what did he teach about right action? Oh, he taught to eliminate killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. And it's the 5 precepts that are going to give you more detail about how to actually practice that. Oh, what did he teach about right livelihood? Oh, well, he taught to eliminate business in weapons, in meat, in living beings, and substances that cause heedlessness and poisons. And then he has this other teaching where you conduct your livelihood in such a way that you're not scheming, you're not flattering, you're not belittling, you're not hinting, and you're not pursuing gain with gain. That's the first purification of right livelihood. But there's a deeper purification. We call that the first fold. So all of these teachings in the Eightfold Path, it's the first fold. There's deeper teachings under right speech, right action, and right livelihood that you learn beyond this. But that's like the first fold of purification of the mind. That's helping you eliminate craving, which is sensual desire, and it's helping you to eliminate ill will as well. But it's helping you here to eliminate this wrong behavior, because as long as you're conducting yourself in an unwise way with your moral conduct, that unwholesome, those unwise decisions that you're making is going to produce unwholesome results. So as long as you're putting out harmful conduct through your speech, actions, or livelihood, this is all going to come back to you when you're interacting with other people. You will have fully developed and are practicing right speech, right action, right livelihood from the Eightfold Path for a minimum of 1 year. So if you start practicing right speech with your mom, if you guys have a kind of resentful relationship like I did with my mom, or a harsh relationship, or you just have difficulty sometimes where you argue with her and she argues with you, if you're practicing right speech for 1 day or 1 week or 1 month, it's not going to improve your relationship significantly. It's not until you are practicing the moral conduct for a good year that you'll really notice the improvement to your relationships. You can notice some improvement within a month or 2 or 3, right? There can be some improvement, but where you're going to notice the real significant improvement is when you can bring your moral conduct up to what the Buddha is describing in the Eightfold Path, and then maintain that for an entire year with all the people around you. Right now, if you have craving, desire, attachment in the relationship with your mom, you're going to find it really challenging to practice speaking gently, or some of these other teachings around speech and actions and livelihood. If you have certain cravings in there, it's going to make it challenging for you to practice the moral conduct. So that's why you've got the breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity to help you bring down your cravings, desires, attachments, because then your moral conduct will be easier for you to practice things like right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So by the time that you've eliminated wrong behavior from your mind, you will be practicing the Eightfold Path consistently with the moral conduct for at least 1 year. Then with wrong observances, the way that you'll know that you've eliminated this is that it'll be impossible for you to acknowledge any rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship that is going to help you to get to enlightenment and is useful to attain enlightenment. You might actually be there already. Oftentimes people, when they come to learn with me, they've already been there because they see that I don't do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And that might be one of the reasons why they're studying with me, because they've already done those things other places, and they realize that they don't lead to an improved condition of mind or an improved condition of life. So you might already have eliminated this part of this particular fetter. Any questions on wrong behavior or observances? I saw you got a mic earlier, Jeannie.
So before, when we were talking about how you don't want to harm yourself, and we talked about the topper that I gave to somebody, and then as a result, I hurt myself. Mm-hmm. But these are all discussing how hurting other people, but I want to go back to hurting yourself, because you've been very obviously ill for the last 3 days, and you're continuing to teach. And I wanted to know if that is the wise decision for you to continue to teach rather than stay home and relax and get better.
Okay. So do you feel that I'm harming someone by choosing to teach?
Yourself.
Okay. How am I harming myself?
Because you're not able to get better.
I'm getting better.
Well, slowly, but
I'm
more
getting
slowly.
better. So this is great that you're asking the question, right? Because I taught you guys yesterday that when you have a perception, you shouldn't cling to that perception. And I taught you one of the ways to ensure you're not clinging to perception is ask a question, right? So you have this perception, which is a view or opinion that of the way things seem to be. And right now, Jeannie thinks that maybe I'm harming myself by continuing to teach even though I'm sick. And rather than clinging to that perception, she's asking a question to get clarification. And this is exactly what I taught yesterday. So for me, my goal is to share these teachings to help people get to enlightenment. And I know that this illness is impermanent. It's not going to be permanent. It's just a matter of time before this body gets back to health. Oftentimes in the unenlightened state, an individual, when the body is sick, their mind feels quite miserable, right? And then if they go out into the world feeling that way, they start impacting other people through their intentions, their speech, and their actions, and they cause harm to others through their intentions, speech, and actions because their mind feels miserable. So while this body is sick, there's no misery in the mind. The mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, even though the body is sick. So I can maintain teaching even though the body is sick. But one of the things that I was aware of as I was starting to get sick is that this sickness could impact other people, right? If other people are coming to learn with me, they could get sick too. So that's why I made it very clear early on that I was getting sick, and I let you guys know, because then if you choose to continue to come learn, even though I'm sick, and you get sick, that's your decision. That was a decision that you made. So I'm not harming this being, because this sickness is going to take its course. Whether I'm sitting at home, laying in bed, doing whatever I'm going to do at home, or whether I'm here, the body's going to get healthy whenever it gets healthy. If I ever got to the point where I felt like being at home would improve the sickness, then I would do that. So for example, on Wednesday, I was supposed to teach an evening class online at 9 p.m. And based on where I was with the sickness on Wednesday, which was the heightened part of the sickness that I experienced, I decided not to teach that class on Wednesday evening. So everybody's got to find the middle way for themselves. And you're not going to necessarily be able to tell what the middle way is for somebody else. Everybody has to protect their own contentedness and make decisions that are wise for themselves. And sometimes an individual thinks that they can know what the middle way is for somebody else, but each individual person knows all the variables in their life and what they're up to and what they're doing. And only that person can really find the middle way. And for me, as long as I'm able to teach and I have energy to teach, I can teach. The coughing, the sneezing, the congestion in the nose, that doesn't bother this mind at all. I can maintain my calmness and composure. I know that I'm not going to do anything that would be unwise in terms of my moral conduct. There's no way that I would ever say or do anything that would cause any harm to anybody, because it's been many years that I've been practicing the teachings, and I know that even though this body is sick, I can still teach. So that's why I can continue to teach, that I know that I'm not causing harm to this body, and I'm not causing harm to anybody here, because you can tell that I'm sick, and it's your choice to choose to come and learn. About a year and a half ago, I was in America, and I got COVID when I was there, and I was teaching a retreat, and I got COVID on the last day of the retreat. And I let people know there too that I had a sore throat, and I didn't know I had COVID until after the retreat was over. But then I let everybody know it was COVID so that they could test themselves and everything. This was kind of like towards the tail end of COVID. But I could teach even with COVID, because while the body is sick, while the body might be experiencing a little bit of physical pain, the mind has no pain whatsoever. So by the time you train your mind to a certain degree, you can experience physical pain, but you won't experience any mental pain whatsoever. So that's why I can maintain teaching and doing all the things I normally do, even though the body's sick. If at any point I felt like it would be advantageous to be at home and resting, that's what I would do. But for me, this is exactly where I need to be at this point in time. Junko, I saw you had a question. Or Alan, did you have a question on the same thing? Andy, sorry. I keep calling him Alan. Helping him to eliminate his personal existence view. So this is one of the things, if somebody calls you a name that isn't your actual name, if you get angry and frustrated, that's your personal existence view. So I've been calling him Alan for pretty much the whole retreat. He hasn't got mad or angry at me yet. So it's helping him to... It's helping him to eliminate his personal existence view.
You quite often see shops opening. Is this working? Yes, it is. In Thai society, people open stores, and typically the monks will come and bless the store. Mm-hmm. In situations where they open bars, you still see monks blessing a bar, even though it's not the right livelihood. Mm-hmm. Why are the monks doing that, which is really against the Eightfold Path?
Because they don't understand the teachings that the Buddha taught. Because not only did he teach that opening that kind of business is wrong livelihood, but he never taught to bless a business or bless a house or any of these kinds of things. He actually says it very clearly in his teachings that people were doing those things during his lifetime, and he explains how he doesn't do it. He says it very clearly, but because most people aren't studying the original teachings of the Buddha, they might be doing those things. So if I was ordained, I would not be doing those things, and I don't do those things even as a teacher, because it promotes wrong livelihood and it promotes wrong view. That if an individual thought that I could come into their business and I could sprinkle some water around and now their business is going to be successful, they're not understanding right view. They're not understanding the natural law of karma, and me being there to do that is precipitating that misunderstanding and that delusion and that confusion. So that's why the Buddha didn't do it, and that's why I wouldn't do it either. But because not everybody is studying the teachings of the Buddha closely, that's why you'll see a lot of people doing that. During the lifetime of the Buddha, there were Brahmin who were Hindu priests that were doing these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And then there was the Buddha who was teaching people that that's unwise based on what it really takes to get to enlightenment. And these Brahmin were collecting money in order to do these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And the people believed that if they went to this Brahmin, they could pay them, they would do a rite, ritual, ceremony, and worship, and then their life was supposed to get better. Well, now, 2,500 years later, the monks have become the Brahmin. The monks are now performing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship for a fee. And people believe that if they have this monk included in their business in the grand opening, that it will produce better results for them. But if you understand the natural law of karma, the way that that business becomes successful is to offer good products and good services and have great relationships with their customers and practice the wisdom with the moral conduct and do a really good job with their business. That's the way you be successful. It doesn't matter this water being sprinkled around. That doesn't accomplish anything. So that's what the Buddha taught. That's what will be wise. But because everybody's at a different point in their practice, what someone else chooses to do is up to them. Because when I was in America and I was opening my business, I didn't understand what I understand now. And I also had the monks come to my business and sprinkle water around. And I did that once. And then that was part of what made me realize this doesn't work, because I did all those kinds of things. So just because somebody else is doing that, we should never sit in judgment of that, because that might be part of what leads them to realize that, oh, there's something else beyond this, because we did that sprinkling of the water and it's really not working perhaps. And now they can see true reality. But unfortunately, this is what's leading people away from the teachings of the Buddha in some cases, because they think that what the monks are doing is the teachings of the Buddha, and then they do those things and then they don't work. And then the people say, the teachings of the Buddha don't work. But no, that's because those aren't the teachings of the Buddha. That's what you're doing, is you're not practicing the teachings of the Buddha. If you practice the real teachings, they work for sure. But sometimes people associating the rites, rituals, and ceremonies and worship to the Buddha, and then realizing those things don't work, they might turn away from the Buddha's teachings. So what other people choose to do, it's up to them. As long as you know the truth, then you can get to enlightenment. If you could use that.
Aren't they trained to learn the teachings to become an ordained monk?
They are trained, and then the government ultimately tests them. But what the government is teaching them isn't necessarily the true teachings of the Buddha. They're working on improving these kinds of things more and more. But right now, we're at exactly where the Buddha said we would be. 2,500 years after his death, he talked about these 500-year cycles that we would go through, where the first cycle was the first 500 years after his death. He said that people would be really strong in understanding his teachings, and essentially lots of people would be getting to enlightenment. The second 500 years, he said people would be really good at meditation. The third 500 years, he said scholars would be writing about his teachings and commenting and describing some of the things that he taught. And that's exactly what happened. Then the fourth 500 years, he said people would be really good with generosity, practicing generosity in regards to his teachings. And this is where all these temples in Thailand were built between the last 500 to 1,000 years. People were donating land donating resources. The massive amount of temples were being built. That's exactly what happened. And then the last 500 years, he said that people would be utterly confused about what he taught. He said that people would be arguing and fighting. The ordained practitioners would be arguing with each other. The household practitioners would be arguing with each other, and nobody would even know what he actually taught. And that just ended in 2017. That was the last 500-year cycle. And then he talked about at that point, there would be a Buddha who would arise in the world and restore his teachings back into the world in such a way that everybody would be able to learn them gradually, slowly, but surely. And essentially the entire world would gradually become enlightened. So he described these 500-year cycles, and we just ended that period of time. And that's why you see in the world so many people misunderstanding his teachings, because it happened exactly the way he said it would. I know, Junko, you, okay.
Mentioned, so don't believe what you said, and they don't believe even the Buddha said. So when I heard the word, what? So I came here to learn about Buddhism, and then what is the truth. So, but now, so we've learned so how to eliminate the doubt, and then so the meaning of don't believe what you said, and then don't believe even the Buddha said means like be doubtful about what others said. So until I invest, or until I understand what that truth means. But still, I'm not so sure. To kind of to eliminate doubt, and then so don't believe what the Buddha said. So what the kind of how to deal with those kind of situation or teaching.
Okay, so with belief, it's just that somebody's telling you something, and now you're believing it. You don't know whether it's true or false or not. You're just believing it because somebody told you the sky's purple, right? And you're just, all right, the sky's purple. You're just believing it. You haven't verified it for yourself. But when you look outside and you see the sky's white or the sky's blue, then you've independently verified it for yourself, and you know that the sky is not purple. But if you just go around believing that the sky's purple, you're being led down a path that is untrue. And it's not going to produce beneficial results for you. So what I'm teaching you and what the Buddha taught was to always independently verify something. Don't just believe somebody because they've been teaching for 40 years or 50 years, or because they're ordained, or because they've had other teachers and maybe they trace their lineage back to a certain point in time, or maybe they have 500,000 people that follow them, or 2 million people that follow them. Just because there's lots of people following somebody, or just because they're ordained, or just because they have a teacher who has a teacher who has a teacher, don't just believe somebody of what they say. Always look to independently verify. If someone tells you the sky's purple, you know that that's not true because you've seen the sky for yourself and you've independently verified that it's not purple. Right? It's blue and it's white. I'm sure in some cases, in some places, it can be purple, but generally it's either blue or it's kind of white, right? That's the color of the sky. So you would like to not believe anything because you don't know whether it's true or false. You need to get to wisdom. So I'm not encouraging you to have doubt. What I'm encouraging you to do is investigate and examine for yourself. I'm here to present you the teachings through books, through audiobooks, through classes and courses and retreats. And I'm just sharing with you what the natural laws are. And then I show you in some cases how to independently reflect on those and how to practice them. But if there's ever a time that I teach something that you don't know how to independently verify, you can ask the question, David, can you help me understand how to independently verify that? I'm typically helping you to learn that as we go. But if there's ever a time where I don't say that, you can ask me, or you can talk privately, or you can go off and try to independently verify it and come back and then ask me, David, I wasn't able to independently verify this. Can you help me understand how? Because that's when you can get to wisdom and you can see the truth, when you independently verify something. And now that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment, because you've cultivated wisdom, and it's going to antidote that ignorance that the Buddha talks about.
Thank you so much. So I'm sorry. So to make sure that my understanding, so for example, you mentioned about the temple, a lot of temple, but not all temples behavior or not all monks' behavior is always proper. So that kind of makes sense. So yeah, what they said is what they're doing is different. So I could maybe investigate to see the reality and what they said to us.
Yeah. What's that called when everyone's not doing the same exact thing? In relationship to the teachings of the Buddha, what is it called when you see some people doing some things and other people doing other things and other people doing other things? What is that called? Do you remember?
What is it called?
Yeah. There's something that the Buddha taught that explains this. Why do we see some monks practicing the teachings very closely, other monks just kind of practicing them a little bit, and other monks completely not even practicing them at all, even though they're ordained?
Ignorance? No?
That's where it's coming from, yes. But what is it called in terms of the natural laws of existence?
Craving?
That's where it's coming from too. But relationship to the three universal truths. What explains what we see in the world when different people are practicing different things?
I'm not sure.
Can somebody help her? Impermanence.
Permanent.
Right? So if we saw every single monk in the entire world practicing every single teaching of the Buddha exactly correct and accurately, that would be permanence. Does that exist? No. So your mind is going to think that everybody should be practicing the teachings exactly the same. But that's your mind craving permanence, not understanding the universal truth of impermanence. So when I look out at the world and I see some monks practicing the teachings very closely, other monks are just kind of half in, half out, and other monks are completely like not even close to what the Buddha taught, this makes complete sense to me because of the universal truth of impermanence. It explains it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I don't have any thoughts or expectation that every single monk is going to practice the teachings exactly the same, even during the lifetime of the Buddha. Even the Buddha talks about this. He says, if I'm a cow and I'm walking on soft earth and I'm leaving my footprints in the earth, and there's a donkey walking behind me, and the donkey is putting its hoof prints into my prints, and the donkey's thinking, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow. Just because the donkey's putting its hoofs in my hoof prints and it's thinking, I'm a cow, does that make the donkey a cow? You're shaking your head, no. Right. So just because someone puts on an orange robe and they shave their hair, does that make them a monk? No, it doesn't make them a monk, does it? What makes them a monk, what makes them an ordained practitioner is, are they learning the teachings of the Buddha and are they practicing them? That's what makes them a monk. And that's what the Buddha taught during his lifetime. And that's why he encouraged people to support those individuals who are truly practicing his teachings, because there were tens and thousands of people that were learning and practicing his teachings during his lifetime, and not all of them were practicing them closely. But just because someone's not practicing his teachings closely, he's not going to push them away, because these people are on their own journey. If an individual learns and understands just one sentence of the teachings of the Buddha, this is good for their welfare and peacefulness for a very long time. The Buddha talks about this. This is a quote directly from the Buddha. If you learn the teachings of the Buddha and you only understand one sentence, this is good for your peacefulness and welfare for a really long time. out of this 5-day retreat, if you only understood one sentence, which I think you probably understand more than that, it's good for your peacefulness and welfare for a long time. If all you've learned from this retreat is to not lie and you stop lying, that's going to be very good for your welfare and peacefulness for a long time. If you just understood to practice loving kindness, this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, and you start practicing that, that's going to be very well for your peacefulness and welfare for a long time. So when people are on their journey to enlightenment, they're not going to be practicing the teachings perfectly. The only person who's going to be practicing the teachings perfectly is an enlightened being. And everybody else is in the process of getting there. So if a teacher was to push away students who weren't practicing their teachings perfectly, they would never have any students, because every single student who ever starts to learn with a teacher, they're not practicing the teachings perfectly. So there's going to be people who are in the process of getting to enlightenment who aren't practicing the teachings very closely. But even if they just understand one sentence, that would be very good for their welfare and peacefulness. Here in Thailand, if an ordained practitioner does something very significant, like using drugs or having sex with children or things like this, they will do what's called defrocking them, where they will ask them to step down, take off their robe, and defrock them. If they're doing something very significant. But if it's something kind of minor, like smoking a cigarette or gambling or something like this, or listening to music, even though these are things that an ordained practitioner should not be doing, they won't defrock them over things like that, because their mind is still in the process of getting to enlightenment. They haven't fully understood the teachings, they're not fully practicing them, so they won't defrock them in those situations. But in real significant issues, they will defrock them. So everybody, all of you guys are on the path to enlightenment. You're making mistakes all the way along, all the way through, and your teacher understands that you're not perfect, and it's going to take you many years to implement these teachings. So we understand that not everybody's going to be practicing the teachings perfectly, and that's explained through the universal truth of
impermanent.
Yes, very good. The universal truth of impermanence explains that to us. We can see it very clearly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so this may seem a little random, but I'm curious about intuition. So just going back to that example of the ceremony I was involved in, there was a part of me that knew that that wasn't a good decision for me. But I didn't have all of this teaching to know that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just curious about where intuition is that superstition, or is it actually a form of wisdom? Because that part of me I rely on a lot. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it'd be very helpful to kind of understand where it fits in.
Yeah. What people call intuition, to me, is actually wisdom that they haven't yet fully developed. That there was a certain amount of wisdom in your mind that understood that those ceremonies and rituals and so forth wasn't a wise thing for you to do, but you didn't have fully developed wisdom the way you do now, that you're seeing the teaching and why and the dependent origination and all those other things. So there was some amount of wisdom there that you were tapping into and realizing, yeah, that's probably, I'm not really that interested in doing that thing. So it's not like there's this magical thing or anything like that, or just like this underlying intuition. It's wisdom. It's wise decision making. It's just not fully developed yet, and you don't necessarily know 100% the truth yet, but now you do on this particular topic. And now you're going to make wise decisions based on this particular wisdom, and you won't consider that intuition anymore. It is just a wise decision. So what people are referring to as intuition is really just a low grade of wisdom that's in there kind of permeating, but it hasn't been brought to full growth and perfection yet. Let's see if you guys online have any questions. You're welcome to put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. It looks like Chris has a question here in YouTube. Can you share where Gautama Buddha described the 500-year cycles in detail? I think I remember him covering this in some of the Pali Canon that I read, but I don't remember it being shared in detail. Chris, if you send me a private message, I will send you the text and the references for that. I don't think I published that in any of the books, but I have it and I can send it to you if you would like that. And anybody else that would like that, you can let me know. Just send me a private message and I'll send it back to you with the text from the Buddha and the references of where it came from. Okay, let's see. We have a bunch of people here online. I'm not seeing any questions. So what I'm going to do then is, right now is 11:20. I'm going to pause here for lunch. Actually, you know what? Let's take a break. And there's something I didn't teach you guys as part of this retreat that I would like to come back and teach you guys. There was a topic, I don't know if you guys even remember. It's called, here, I'll show it to you. Let me back it up. I'll let you guys take a little break and then we can come back and I'll teach you this. It was something that we didn't have time for the other day and I just kind of skipped over it. But I knew I'd had time to come back to it. It's this: right view, developing accomplishment in view to attain the first stage of enlightenment. We didn't have time to do this yesterday before we went to Hua Tung Tao, but this will only take me about probably 30 minutes to teach it. If you like, I can teach it to you right now, or if you'd like to take a break, we can break. You guys are shaking your head now? Okay, we can teach this now. This is really short and straightforward. Okay, so this is something that you're going to need to learn in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And then after this, we'll go to lunch. So right view is the Four Noble Truths. That's just pure right view. Establishing right view is understanding that craving, desire, attachment is what's leading to your discontentedness. That's the cause, right? So that first noble truth is discontentedness is the problem, right? The up and down of the mind, the conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. The second noble truth is explaining that it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing that discontentedness, that the mind's craving permanence. The third noble truth is explaining the elimination of discontentedness as possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And then the fourth noble truth is explaining that the way to eliminating discontentedness is to practice the Eightfold Path. That's the establishing of right view. That's where you have the real breakthrough to finally understanding that it's your own mind that's causing your own discontent feelings. That is not something external, that other people aren't causing you to be angry. They're not causing you to be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. It's your own mind through craving, desire, attachment, that longing, yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. But now we're going to start learning about developing accomplishment in view. This is beyond the Four Noble Truths. This is more about right view. Okay? So here, by developing a deep understanding and practice of the Four Noble Truths, that's what's going to help you to understand and establish right view, where you're understanding what is discontentedness, the cause, the elimination, and the path to eliminating discontentedness. That's what I just shared with you. And this requires you to understand the three universal truths of impermanence, discontentedness, and non-self. Those are building blocks to help you establish right view. And then what the Buddha shares also about establishing accomplishment in view is abandoning personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances, those first three fetters. And to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality, leading to the plane of misery. What this means is that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will never be reborn into hell, the animal realm, or the afflicted spirit realm. So by the time you develop accomplishment in view, you haven't fully extinguished your craving, anger, and ignorance yet, but you've eliminated enough of it that you'll no longer be doing things that are going to lead to rebirth into hell, the animal realm, or the realm of afflicted spirits, because you've eliminated personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. So if you eliminate these three fetters, you will have eliminated enough of your craving, anger, and ignorance that you won't be reborn into hell, animal realm, or afflicted spirits. If you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back into the human world. So this is part of establishing development in view or accomplishment in view. And then here's some more discourses from the Buddha that I kind of put together in order to help you guys see what he's talking about in terms of accomplishment in view. In order to get to an accomplishment in view, you need to understand dependent origination in the natural law of karma. The Buddha talks about that you need to develop wisdom of principle. What this is understanding each individual aspect of dependent origination, where you understand what is ignorance, what is volitional formations, what is consciousness, what is name and form, what is the six sense bases, what is contact, what is feelings, what is craving, what is clinging, what is existence, what is birth, what is aging and death, those individual steps of dependent origination, which are in volume 5 of the book series, where you can learn what each one of those statements are. That's what the Buddha calls wisdom of principle. What wisdom of entailment is understanding how one thing leads to another, that then leads to another, that then leads to another, that then leads to another. It's understanding this connection between this cause and condition leads to this result. So by understanding dependent origination and the natural law of karma, you will start to develop what's called the wisdom of principle and the wisdom of entailment. You'll be able to see this cause and effect or action and result as it relates to dependent origination and as it relates to the natural law of karma. So like, for example, going back to the news, when I watch the news, I'm sitting there trying to figure out the natural law of karma. Like somebody gets on the news and says such and such has been murdered, and now they start talking about the situation that led up to that murder. You can see something in the teachings of the Buddha that was based on the natural law of karma that led up to that murder, right? You can easily, the more you know about the teachings of the Buddha, you can see that each person experiencing any particular result, it's based on their own decisions. These things don't just happen to us as terms of good luck or bad luck or fate or destiny. It's a result of your decisions. So if you're watching some political thing or any number of things, you can see through the wisdom of entailment in this wisdom of principle, if you understand the cause and effect in terms of dependent origination in the natural law of karma, you can see everything in the world around you is happening due to cause and effect, or cause and effect, action and result, action and result. So this is how you develop accomplishment in view, that your view will now be that there's no such thing as good luck and bad luck. There's no such thing as destiny and fate, because you will be able to see this cause and effect very clearly. And it comes from you having developed wisdom of principle and wisdom of entailment and being able to see these connections. Then the Buddha talks about these 6 cases of incapability for someone who has accomplishment in view. And there's multiple discourses here, and I've kind of smushed them all together to fit them onto a slide. But in the book, I've laid them out in a way that's more easy to digest, but I'll just walk you through these. The first discourse, he says, these are 6 cases of incapability, that by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you will be incapable of considering any conditioned object as permanent, pleasurable, or self, right? Because you will have already seen the 3 universal truths, and you will know that there's no conditioned object around you that is permanent. You will know that none of it's going to lead to permanent pleasure, and you'll know that none of these things around you are the self, because you will deeply have penetrated the 3 universal truths. You'll know that chocolate cake tastes really good, and you'll enjoy that chocolate cake, but you'll know that it's not going to lead to permanent peacefulness or permanent pleasure. So you won't be able to discern any conditioned object as being pleasurable, meaning it's going to lead to permanent pleasure. Right? So that's the first one here, where the Buddha says you're incapable of considering any conditioned object as permanent, as pleasurable, or self. That you'll be incapable of doing a grave act that brings immediate results. You're going to learn that here in a moment, what these grave acts are. These are, some people refer to them as the 5 heinous crimes, but you'll see what I'm talking about here. These are these grave acts that bring immediate results. You'll be incapable of resorting to the belief that purity, meaning enlightenment, comes about through superstitious and auspicious acts. This is the words of the Buddha. he says that by the time you get to accomplishment in view, that you will be incapable of resorting to the belief that purity or enlightenment comes about through superstitious or auspicious acts. This is like chanting. This is like sprinkling water on you. This is like tying strings on your wrist. Any kind of rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. This is all superstitious and auspicious acts. And by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you'll be incapable of seeing any of those things as potentially leading to enlightenment. Incapable of seeking a person worthy of offerings outside of the community. What the Buddha is talking about here is that during his lifetime, there were multiple teachers who were teaching, and they were all claiming that their teachings were leading to enlightenment. The Buddha was just one of many teachers who were teaching, right? And his community just kept growing and growing and growing, became massive because he was teaching the truth, and people could see that he was teaching the truth because more and more people were learning that and getting to enlightenment. So as he aged and he went further in his teaching career, it just dwarfed the size of other individual communities. But by the time somebody gets to accomplishment in view, they've developed right view in the Four Noble Truths deeply enough. They've seen enough progress to the condition of their mind and the condition of their life that the Buddha is saying this household practitioner would be incapable of making an offering to another community because they would know that those teachings don't lead to enlightenment, because they would have seen the improvement to the condition of their mind in their life through independently verifying that his teachings are actually working through improving the condition of their mind. So this is the reference in the Pali Canon that traces back to. The second discourse on the 6 cases of incapability is that by the time someone has accomplishment in view, they would be incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the teacher, the teachings in the community, the training. So all 4 of these things, because again, they would have seen a certain amount of progress by the time they get to the first stage of enlightenment, because you accomplish this accomplishment in view when you get to the first stage of enlightenment on your way there. So you would have experienced a certain amount of progress and improvement to the condition of your mind. You would see that this teacher has helped you to be able to get to that point. So you would be incapable of having this respect and politeness for the teacher, the teachings, the community, and the training. And you would be incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon. What this is that you're always seeking the truth, that you're unwilling to believe anything. By the time you get to accomplishment in view, you're incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon, meaning anything that you're going to do, you're going to verify it. You're going to verify anything because you're interested in making wise decisions. And how could you get to enlightenment, extinguishing your unwise decisions that's producing unwholesome results, if you don't make decisions based in wisdom? You need to base your decisions in wisdom and truth. So instead of making decisions that are based in belief, you're going to always seek the truth. And one of the best ways to do that is oftentimes to ask questions. Ask people questions around you. And then when you get the answers, then you know what the truth is. Incapable of undergoing an 8th existence. So by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, which you will have accomplishment in view at that point, you will be incapable of having an 8th existence, because if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you will only come back a maximum of 7 times. You don't have to come back 7 times, but a maximum of 7 times. So the Buddha is saying someone who's getting to the first stage of enlightenment, essentially they have accomplishment in view, they would be incapable of being reborn an 8th time. That it's only going to be a maximum of 7 times. Some people might be reborn 2 times or 3 times, but a maximum of 8. This third discourse here of 6 cases of incapability: incapable of depriving one's mother, father, or an arahant of life. These are back here when the Buddha was sharing incapable of doing a grave act that brings immediate results. This is what he's talking about, this discourse right here. That by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you would be incapable of killing your mother, killing your father, or killing an arahant. The reason why is because your mother and father to the Buddha are your original teachers. They're the ones who brought you into this world. They're the ones who helped you learn how to sustain your life. Whether you agreed or disagreed with what your parents did growing up, they at least did enough that you're able to sustain your life now by yourself without your parents. They're your original teachers. They taught you how to brush your teeth, comb your hair, take a shower. They taught you to eat food. They taught you various things about life that have now helped you to be able to sustain this life. You most likely didn't agree with everything your parents ever did, because that would be permanence if you did, and that doesn't exist. But they at least taught you how to sustain your life. They're your original teachers. They even taught you English and language. If you didn't speak English, they taught you a different language, right? Whatever language you speak, they taught you that to start interacting in the world. So your mother and father are your original teachers, and they're the ones who provided you this opportunity to now come into the human realm and potentially get to enlightenment and escape this whole cycle of rebirth. So there's this gratitude that an individual starts to cultivate for their parents, whether you agreed or disagreed with what they did in your life. Of course, I don't think there's any child who ever has agreed with 100% of what their parents did in their life. That would be permanence, right? But you can at least have appreciation and gratitude for them bringing you into the world, helping you learn how to sustain your life, and now you're able to sustain your life by yourself. So that's why by the time someone gets to accomplishment in view, they wouldn't be able to kill their mother or father. They also wouldn't be able to kill an arahant, who's an enlightened being, because by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you would know how important enlightened beings are to the world, that without enlightened beings, other people aren't going to be able to understand the teachings of the Buddha and actually be able to get to enlightenment. If there weren't enlightened beings in the world, we would lose the teachings that it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. So by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you would be incapable of killing an enlightened being. You'd be incapable of shedding the Tathagata's blood with a mind of hatred. A Tathagata is a Buddha. Not only would you understand how important a Tathagata is, but you would understand how important a Buddha is to the world. That a Buddha is going to have deep, profound wisdom. Having a Buddha in the world is the best opportunity for you to ever get to enlightenment. If you're born and alive during the lifetime of a Buddha, your karma is very, very wholesome to be born during that period of time that a Buddha is alive, because now you have the ability to learn directly from a Buddha and get deep wisdom. So you would be disinterested in ever killing a Buddha if you had accomplishment in view. You'd be incapable of creating division in the community. The community meaning this community. That if you had accomplishment in view, you would have developed your mind to a certain degree. You would have seen certain progress to the development of your mind in your life. You would be incapable of creating an argument in the community and separating the community and kind of separating the community out, because you would know how important this community is to your own development and to the development of others. So you would be incapable of kind of fracturing the community and separating it apart. You'd be incapable of acknowledging another teacher by the time you get to accomplishment in view, because again, you've experienced a certain amount of progress and improvement to the condition of your mind in your life, that you would have deeply penetrated the teachings of the Buddha, and you wouldn't be able to acknowledge another teacher as being your teacher, because you would know that it's those teachings that are leading you to enlightenment. So by the time you get to accomplishment in view, where you truly have seen the truth, and you're experiencing the improvement to the condition of your mind, you wouldn't be able to acknowledge another teacher. This fourth discourse of 6 cases of incapability, which is a total of 24 cases of incapability, but the Buddha oftentimes does it this way, where he has multiple discourses. In this fourth discourse, he says that one would be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by oneself, another, or both made by oneself and by another, not made by oneself, but have arisen by accident or chance, are made by another, but have arisen by accident or chance, are made neither by oneself nor by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. So why does pleasure and pain arise in the mind? What's the cause of pleasure and pain arising in the mind? Craving, desire, attachment, right? So it's not by oneself, because is there a self? There is no self, right? So the Buddha is saying that by the time you get to accomplishment of view, you can't resort to the view that pleasure and pain are made by oneself, because you already know there is no self. What pleasure and pain is caused by is craving, desire, attachment. That's what's causing pleasure and pain. And you wouldn't be able to resort to the view that pleasure and pain is caused by another person. This would be blaming somebody else for your discontentedness. By the time you get to accomplishment in view, you wouldn't be able to resort to the view that another person is causing you to be discontent, or that discontentedness is caused both made by oneself and made by another. You wouldn't be able to resort to this view because you would know that that's not true. It's not possible for the self to cause discontentedness because it's craving, desire, attachment. And it's not possible for someone else to cause the mind to be discontent because it's caused by craving, desire, attachment. It's not caused by somebody else. Not made by oneself, but have arisen by accident or chance. You would know that sadness and anger and frustration and irritation and annoyance and guilt and shame and fear, all of this stuff, it's not being arisen by chance or by accident. It's from a certain cause, a certain condition, right? That there's a certain cause and condition that's arising these discontent feelings. It's craving, desire, attachment. You would have penetrated into that and seen that in order to get to accomplishment in view. Are not made by another, but have arisen by accident or chance, right? So that's the same thing essentially, but not made by another. Are made neither by oneself nor by another, but have arisen by accident and chance. So the Buddha teaches this way to exhaust all possibilities. He's just being very thorough in his teachings to exhaust all possibilities. So what's the cause of discontentedness? Do you guys agree? Those of you guys that didn't answer, do you agree with Victoria? You agree with her? You sure? Okay. Craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, that's what's causing the discontentedness. Okay, so this is one thing that you'll need is develop these 6 cases of incapability in order to have accomplishment in view. Here's some more that the Buddha talks about to attain accomplishment in view. So there's right view of various kinds. He talks about understanding the unwholesome in the root of the unwholesome. So what the unwholesome is that he describes is the killing of living beings, the taking what is not given, the misconduct and sensual pleasures, this sexual misconduct, these are his words, false speech, malicious speech, harsh speech, gossip, craving, ill will, and wrong view. These are all unwholesome things. Then there's the root of unwholesome, which is craving, anger, and ignorance, the unknowing of true reality. These are the 3 unwholesome roots. You learned this when I talked about the natural law of karma, of what leads to unwholesome results in your life. It's the decisions that you make through craving, through anger, and through ignorance. Whenever you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's always going to lead to unwholesome results. So these are the unwholesome. And then what's motivating all of these things is the craving, anger, and ignorance. So you would understand this. Now, understanding the wholesome in the root of the wholesome. The wholesome is to abstain from killing, to abstain from taking what is not given, to abstain from misconduct and sensual pleasures, to abstain from false speech, abstain from malicious speech, harsh speech, gossip, and non-craving, which the opposite of that is generosity, non-ill will, the opposite of that is loving kindness, and right view, which is wisdom. So the root of the wholesome is non-craving or generosity, non-anger or loving kindness, and non-ignorance or wisdom. These are called the 3 wholesome roots. So by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you would understand the unwholesome in the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome in the root of the wholesome. This is accomplishment in view. You would need to know this. Okay? This was something from day 4, right? So I'm just kind of helping you guys go back and learn this. Any questions on any of this? Yes.
So just to the, what was it, the accident sort of, like mistake or accidents. I'm just thinking of like wrong place, wrong time. is that ultimately then back to karma?
It is the wrong
like-
place and it is the wrong time, but you chose to be there. That's your choice to be there. So there's always a decision that leads to that situation. So the way that you think about the natural law of karma is a sequence of events. So let's just say I'm sitting at a stoplight and I'm just sitting there minding my own business and somebody plows into the back of my car. It's still my karma. It's not punishments, right? It's not that I was at fault, but there was a sequence of events that led to me sitting at that traffic light and somebody plowing into the back of me. That I chose to purchase a car. I chose to drive at that particular time. I chose to stop at that light. The person behind me, maybe they were distracted on their phone. Maybe they didn't maintain their car. There was some sequence of events that led to that. So you shouldn't think of it as you're being punished, but there was some sequence of events. There was a cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. And it was your decisions that led to that particular thing.
Right. So there is then no accident or by chance.
An accident is like, oops, I didn't mean to do that, right? So if you get in a car accident, this was an accident. I didn't mean to run into you. I'm so sorry. This was an accident. Yes, there is that accident, but that accident came from certain decisions that were made. That the person was looking at their phone, they weren't paying attention to the traffic, and now they ran into the back of that person. So that was a decision that that person made. And now that's why that person, their insurance goes up because they made an unwise decision, and now they're experiencing that. And the person who was just sitting at the light, that person's insurance or your own insurance is going to cover that. And now you need to deal with this situation, but that was a sequence of events. But an accident is something that you didn't intend to do. You didn't intend to do that. But in a situation where someone's looking at their phone and they run into the back of you, they didn't intend to run into the back of you, but they were making an unwise decision. They weren't practicing singleness of mind. They were looking at the phone and they were trying to drive at the same time.
Right. So what if you are spurred from something? Like I'm thinking, particularly like 9/11 as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend that was supposed to be on one of those planes, but at the last minute the plan was changed and they didn't get on that flight.
Mm-hmm.
So the other side of that I think in the past I would have thought of that as
divine intervention.
That sort of wasn't by chance that happened. So I'm just kind of
it was just a choice and decision. Oftentimes we want to think that there's something mystical or magical or there's some divine intervention. I'm a special person and there was this divine intervention that came in and saved me, or some intuition that I knew that thing was going to occur. Not necessarily. It can just be that the person just decided that I'm not going to get on this plane for whatever reason. Right. Once we try to start peering into this and thinking all of those kinds of things, that's getting into the superstition and auspicious things. There was just a choice that was made that they chose not to get on that plane, and that particular plane ended up being one of the planes that crashed into somewhere based on 9/11. But that wasn't their fate or their destiny or anything like that. It was just a decision that was made, and then there was a certain result. A sequence of events.
I think I've got
you have to look at it. Look at it more.
I think I've got to look at that. When it's on a bigger.
We're oftentimes taught to believe about this fate or destiny or good luck or bad luck. It's just a sequence of events. Every single thing around you, it just happens as a sequence of events. Like, I think that's your Tai Chi right there on the, is that your Tai Chi? Mm-hmm. Why is that there? Because you chose to go to the store, you purchased it, and you brought it back. And now let's just say you drink the rest of it, and now you have that in your body. Okay, that was a cause and effect. But now let's just say it falls on the ground and it spills. Okay, there's just a cause and effect there. That's all it is. Every single thing around you is just a cause and effect. There's no force or energy or being that's trying to control anything to happen in this world. There are supreme beings like God, but God's not trying to control what's going on in the world. Anything that we experience is a result of certain decisions. The reason why that person didn't die on that plane that day is because he or she chose not to get on that plane.
Right. And
That was a
I
choice.
think I've got to mull over, though, what about, the 3,500 people that did die?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? So I think I've got to sit with that.
And that's because they chose to get on that plane, or they chose to go to that building, right? And it's not that they're being punished for having done that. It was just a sequence of events. None of us were in that building that day when the plane crashed into it, and that's why we didn't die. It's just a sequence of events. But we're going to die some other way.
Right.
We're going to all eventually die, right? Just a sequence of events. Okay, I see a bunch of mics. Yep.
With the text that was the text that was explaining the dependent origination.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was even farther, if I'm not mistaken, because there was a word there that I didn't understand. I think I've seen it before, but I would just like, if you could give an example of the meaning of this word, that would be fantastic.
Which word? This is dependent origination here.
Yeah, but I think it was in the past one. It was something related to dependent origination from the thing that you said that you were going to explain to us that only took 30 minutes.
Oh, the one that we just did?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Oh, this one.
Yeah, entailment. That one.
Wisdom of entailment. This is seeing that one thing leads to another. This cause or condition leads to this effect, or this action leads to this effect. So like right now, that microphone you have, it has batteries, so it worked. That other microphone you had, it didn't have juice in the batteries perhaps, so it didn't work, right? This is like cause and effect. So by the time you get to wisdom of entailment, you will see this cause and effect in relationship to dependent origination and also the natural law of Gaima, the cause and effect, the cause and effect. And you'll see that in all aspects of the world around you. And this is what your mind's awakening to, being able to see that cause and effect very clearly, because it's your wise decisions that's going to produce any kind of wholesome result. And it's your unwise decisions that's producing your unwholesome results. So in order for you to get to enlightenment, where your mind is wise about this natural law and you're only experiencing wholesome results in your life, then you're going to need to be able to see this cause and effect so that now you can make only wise decisions.
Okay, and then entailment would be that, like this chain of reactions or this cause and effect. That would be the meaning of this word.
Yeah, that's the chain.
Okay.
And then the wisdom of principle is the actual item itself.
Yeah.
So going back to dependent origination, the wisdom of principle is understanding what ignorance is, what volitional formations is, what consciousness is, name and form, each one of these things. That's what wisdom of principle is. Wisdom of entailment is understanding that when there's ignorance, then there's going to be volitional formations that are uninformed and lacking of wisdom. When there's unwise decisions, that's going to lead to the production of a consciousness. When there's a consciousness, that's going to lead to finding a name and form, which is the physical body. When there's a physical body and a consciousness that has come together, then there's going to be the forming of the six sense spaces. When there's the six sense spaces, then there's going to be contact through those six sense spaces. Once you're experiencing contact through the six sense spaces, then you're going to experience conditioned feelings of either pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Then the mind's going to have craving, where it's craving for those pleasant feelings to be permanent. And then when there's craving, the mind's going to have clinging, where you're holding on to things, wanting them to be permanent. When there's clinging, it's going to lead to existence, where you come into the world into an existence. Once there's an existence, there's then going to be birth. As long as there's birth, there's going to be aging and death. And if there's birth, aging, and death, there's also going to be sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So that entailment is seeing the cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. So that's why, because this is like a chain reaction, that because of ignorance, it's going to lead to birth, aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair, this discontentedness. That's why your number one goal in this path is to eliminate ignorance, because this is a chain reaction. If there's ignorance, all these other things are going to happen as a result. But if there's no ignorance, you've dismantled this whole thing. So that's why you're always working to accomplish the acquiring of wisdom, not believing anything, getting to the wisdom.
And just another question. Once someone has eliminated the 3 first fetters, and then that person dies, then once the next being is back, I guess that being is born again with those 3 fetters. So what happens there is just easier for that being to get rid of that and then continue where he kind of left,
Yeah, so if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you've eliminated personal existence, view, the doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. But now when you're reborn, you're still going to have all the 10 fetters again. But what's being reborn is really nothing at all. But what's moving from one existence to the other is craving and residual memories. So those residual memories from your previous life where you've studied the teachings of the Buddha, they're going to now be with you in this next life. So now you're going to find it more easy to get back to the teachings of the Buddha. And then you're going to find it easier to start learning and practicing them. So some of you might have learned these teachings in a past life, and now you're finding it easier to get back into the teachings, and you found them again. So if you're learning the teachings and you're like, oh, this just makes so much sense. Of course, killing is unwise. Of course, stealing is unwise. Sexual misconduct is unwise. Lying, intoxicants, yeah, this stuff is all really unwise. And it's really easy to kind of move your practice in that direction, or easier, I should say. Then you might have studied these teachings in a previous life. Can you have those residual memories that are in there? When you're learning the Eightfold Path, if it just seems very straightforward to you and like, yeah, this makes perfect sense, you might have residual memories. So even though when you're being reborn, you have all 10 fetters, you'll find that you'll be able to navigate your way back to the teachings in that next life more easily. And then once you find them, you'll find it easier to start eliminating those. And you'll be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment pretty readily, having been your next life of where you were once a stream enter. You'll be able to get back to stream entry pretty readily. But you're not reborn exactly where you left off. So it's not like when you're reborn, you no longer have personal existence, view, doubt, or wrong behavior and observances. You still have all those things, but it's to a lesser degree. And you've got those residual memories on board to help you to be able to now get rid of those and now potentially make your way further to either the second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment. And it's possible for an individual to have never seen these teachings ever in this life or any previous lives, find them in this life, and then go all the way through to enlightenment. You can do that too. It's possible for the mind to be able to do that. But if someone dies in the first stage of enlightenment, then they'll come back into the human realm. So like some people, they start learning with me when they're like 80 or 90 years old. And they're like, wow, it's like, it's so late for me, should I really learn them? And what I share with them is it's never too late to learn. And there's never a bad time to learn the teachings of the Buddha. So let's just say that 80-year-old person dies when they're 82 and they only ever learn the teachings to a certain degree. That's going to help them in their next life. So essentially what the Buddha is sharing with you is if you fall short of enlightenment for any reason, you will be able to then benefit from your work and your effort that you did in one life. It's going to help you in your next life. So the goal would be to get to enlightenment in this life. But if for some reason you don't, whatever work you do in this life, it's going to help you in your next life. Mm-hmm.
I think it's working. As there is clear concepts of sexual misconduct, is there concepts of sexual good conduct, or necessarily as being related to sensual pleasures, they will always lead to unwholesome results?
Okay, I think we're starting to get into our closing discussion, but that's okay. We can talk a little bit here. So when the Buddha is describing sexual misconduct, you can see just the opposites of that would be the wholesome conduct, right? Like if you're going to have sex, do it in a way that doesn't cause harm to others. And it's possible for you to do that where you're not having sex with minors, right? You're not having unchastity where you're going around having sex with lots of people. You're not having sex outside of your committed relationships. You're also not having sex with someone else who's in a committed relationship. You're not having sex with someone who's decided to be celibate, right? These kinds of things that I taught you guys with the 5 precepts. So as I've shared with you guys, one of the ways to eliminate a craving, desire, attachment is to cut it off and let it go. The other way is to fulfill it. And sex sometimes is that way, that one of the ways to eliminate a craving to sex is just have sex and do it frequently and a whole lot. And the more you do it, you eventually get to the point where it's like, yeah, okay, been there, done that. I don't need to do that. And it might take 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, however long for you to do that. But at some point you'll have had your fill of sex. But during that period of time, if you would like to make wise decisions around your sexual life, do it in the way that the Buddha is teaching you so that you're not causing harm to others, because any harm that you cause to others through your sexual activity, it's just going to come back to you by way of sexually transmitted diseases that are sometimes fatal, by people maybe wanting to beat you up or murder you, maybe a damaging of your reputation. You can even get arrested, like for rape or sex without consent or sex with minors and things like this. So there can be all kinds of harms that come to you based on your sexual activity. So the Buddha is giving you some guidance on this natural law of karma of how to have sex in a way that would be wise. And then at some point in your life, if you ever decide that you would like to let go of sexual activity, then the Buddha teaches you how to be able to do that too. And that's where you'll ultimately see the mind becomes peaceful and joyful permanently when you let go of all the fetters, because you can do all that other work on the path and you can still be maintaining a sexual relationship. So your mind can be completely peaceful and joyful. You've eliminated the ego, you've eliminated all these other fetters that the mind has. But every once in a while, you're not going to be able to get sex and you're going to be agitated, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be annoyed. But everywhere else in your life, it's quite peaceful. Your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your parents, your kids, your boss, your coworkers, you can have quite a bit of peace all throughout your life, but you're still going to get agitated and frustrated when you can't get sex. So some people might decide to stay there for a while, however long it is, many years perhaps. But then at some point, they're going to start appreciating that peacefulness and joy that they experience more than the sex. It's hard to imagine that there's something better than sex in the world, but there is. It's called enlightenment. It's actually better than sex. You can't fathom that, especially when you're young. You can't fathom something being better than sex, but there is. It's called enlightenment. And when your mind starts to experience those glimpses of the light bulb flickering and you seeing the qualities of the mind that you're experiencing, you'll start balancing this and you'll start realizing how much you enjoy those 3 months or 6 months of peacefulness and joy in your mind. And having that little bit of temporary pleasure, whether it's an hour or 3 hours, or maybe the effects of that sex last for a day or 2 or 3, but eventually your mind ends up right back in the painful feelings again. That the sex, the pleasure that you experience through sex, it's only temporary. And you start being able to see that more and more closely. And you start seeing the mind brighten up where there's this more and more peace and joy that comes into it. And you start appreciating that more and more. But in the meantime, if someone's going to have sex, if you do it in the way that the Buddha taught, that way you'll ensure that no harm is coming to you due to your sexual activity. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm trying to understand regarding the chain with cause and effect. I think I more or less understand it with the individual decisions that we all make to be in this place, to be in another, to be in a relationship, in a job. But I think it's more complex when you think about it in society or an accident, for the example of the 9/11, because it's a lot of decisions, individual decisions that, I don't know, like mix in the way. And I think it's, for me, it's a little bit complex to understand that and how these individual decisions mix one another and make a lot of cause and effects that I see like also, I don't know, in wars, in racism, and I don't know, in a lot of social events, I think. And it's bringing my mind like to a very confused place.
Okay, so it's good you're asking questions, because that's what we call that third poison, the ignorance, the unknowing of true reality, is confusion, right? The mind can be confused. So let's just take one of the things that you're talking about, which was racism. Let's take that, right? This is all cause and effect. It's explained exactly through the teachings of the Buddha. Let's say somebody hates someone who is of an opposite race as them, right? This is all craving, anger, and ignorance. The mind is craving for every person to look like them, right? If there's somebody has a different skin color or different nationality, they get angry. So when the craving isn't fulfilled, where their mind's craving permanence, their mind moves to this anger, this hatred, or this ill will. And where is this coming from? The ignorance. So every time someone makes a decision through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So whenever somebody's mind has craving, they want everybody to be of one particular race. Now, when they don't get that craving fulfilled, their mind moves to the anger. It motivates unskillful conduct. There might be hatred. They might be bitter. They might be people getting in fights or murders or different things. It's motivating that unskillful conduct. And where it's coming from is the ignorance, is that they don't understand the universal truth of impermanence, that everybody's different nationality, different ethnicity. Their mind is, because of the ignorance, their mind is having craving, and it's having this anger, and now it's motivating unskillful conduct. Every single thing that happens in the world that is unwholesome is coming from craving, anger, and ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality. You can see it everywhere around you, but you maybe just haven't had the time at this point to look around the world enough to be able to confirm this. You're going to need to take your time and look at things through these teachings that I'm sharing with you, because so far what we do before we get on the path to enlightenment is we're looking out at the world through our own pollutions of mind, through our own lack of wisdom. It's kind of like looking out at the world through a dirty window. And when we look out of the world through the dirty window, the world looks very dirty and it looks very confusing. But when the Buddha is teaching you these teachings and you're learning these teachings and you're getting to that wisdom, it's like cleaning off your window and now being able to look at the world very clearly. So if you'd like to have another example, I just walked you through racism and show you how that's coming from craving, anger, and ignorance. Is there another example you would like to use? I can show you how it's coming from craving, anger, and ignorance. Or do you have a very specific example from your life that you would like to talk about?
Yes. No, I think at the moment it's more clear. I need to digest that and also see it in another things that I watch in the world. I think it's one that I think that concerns me a lot is the social things. I don't know if it's my craving for the world to be better, to be more peaceful. That I'm always trying to make this world not so I'm sorry for the word, but I can't think another not so shitty.
I'm interested in the world being peaceful, but I don't have a craving for the world to be peaceful. Right? This is why I do what I do. I share the teachings of the Buddha because I'm very interested in seeing the world be more peaceful and more joyful. That's why I do what I do, and I do it at no cost. And I do it when I'm sick, right? And I do it, no matter what. When I'm at home, I'm helping somebody online, and when I'm here, I'm helping somebody here. And people schedule personal guidance sessions, and I give away books and audiobooks and videos and podcasts and all these things for free because I'm very motivated to see the world become a peaceful place. But I don't crave it. I don't long for it. I don't yearn for it. So when I see a war break out, I don't get upset. I don't get frustrated because I understand it, that it's the universal truth of impermanence. It's craving, anger, and ignorance. It's cause and effect. I can't fix that. It's the karma of those individuals. So because I understand it, and I don't have a craving, I don't get upset. I can maintain my peace and joy despite there being a war in the world, right? So I'm not joyful because of the war. I'm joyful despite that there's a war in the world. So all these things that are happening around us, it's all cause and effect. And you just need to take some time to be able to see that. This is one of the reasons why I watch the news. I really don't watch the news because I care about this person's life or that person's life necessarily, but I watch it because I'm interested in seeing the natural law of karma and how it plays out. And every time I watch the news, it's always reporting the natural law of karma. That's what the news is. So if you're interested in seeing the natural law of karma, that's one of the ways that you can do it, is through news and situations and things like that.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's a follow-up question to this one. Is it always craving, though? I mean, so I guess, where is empathy then and compassion? Is it always a craving to want that for another or for myself? So I guess I'm now curious about where empathy and compassion fits in.
Okay, so any discontentedness that a being experiences, whether in the past, the present, or the future, it's always caused by craving, desire, attachment. Any discontentedness is caused by that, right? But what you choose to do in the world, you can do it as a goal, objective, or interest without craving, or you could do it with craving. It's not the thing itself. So being interested in seeing the world be peaceful, you can do that with an interest. But wanting it, longing for it, yearning for it, that's different. Because when you're longing and yearning for it, you're going to function very differently. And your mind's going to be discontent in that situation. Where when you do it as a goal, objective, or interest, whether it happens or not, you can maintain your peace and your joy. Depending on how you define empathy, some people define empathy as understanding the feelings of another's and sharing in those feelings of another. That's what some people describe as empathy. This is unwise. To understand the feelings of another is wise. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll more than understand the feelings of others. You'll know exactly why they're having those feelings, because of craving, desire, attachment. Any conditioned feelings that are in the mind are because of craving, desire, attachment. But to share in their feelings is really unwise. That means if your mom's sad, you're going to be sad. If your mom's angry, you're going to be angry. This is unwise. The way other people describe empathy, which is wise, and the way I would describe empathy, is to understand people's feelings. That's what empathy is to understand where people are coming from. But as soon as you start sharing in people's feelings, that's like if they're in the quicksand, you're going to jump down in the quicksand with them in order to help them get out. This would be very unwise. You wouldn't do that. If you saw somebody in the quicksand, you wouldn't jump down into the quicksand to help them get out. What you would do is you would stand on solid ground. You would offer your hand out and you would say, hey, grab my hand. And then when they grab your hand, you're going to say, I'm going to pull, but you're going to need to kick. You kick and I pull and you're going to get out of this place. And now they kick and you pull and they're out, right? Whereas if you jump down in the quicksand with them, there's no way they're getting out and you're not getting out either. So when you see someone sad, if you become sad with them, it's like getting into the quicksand. Or if they're angry and you get angry with them, it's like getting into the quicksand. You would like to stand on stable ground where your mind can be calm and confident and collected and peaceful and composed and joyful. Because now when someone's like, oh, I'm so sad, my mom died, or my mom is in the hospital or something, you can be like, oh, I understand. That understanding that you have is they're attached to their mom. Of course they're sad. They're not a bad person. They haven't done anything wrong. Of course they're sad that their mom's in the hospital because they're unenlightened and they're attached to their mom. I understand. Would you like my thoughts on this? Would you like some help? Yes, please, can you help me? Why am I so sad? Okay, now you can help them. But if they say, no, I'm not interested in your help. Okay, I understand. You can't help them, right? So empathy is to understand a person's feelings, but don't go to that next piece that some people describe it as sharing. That would be unwise. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. Concern is like, hey, I have concern for this person. What some people do is they practice this with craving. They're craving for everybody to be well. And when they see somebody's misfortune, now they become upset or they become sad or frustrated because of someone's misfortune. But if you can bring your mind to concern, now you can maintain your composure, your contentedness, and your joy. So if the mind is worried, that's coming from craving, desire, attachment, because the mind's shaken up. And usually people get worried when they see all the problems in the world. You see all the problems and you're worried. But if you understand the solutions to those problems, which is the elimination of craving, anger, and ignorance, that's the solution to the whole world's problems. If every single being in the world eliminated craving, anger, and ignorance, this world would be heaven on earth, because nobody would be doing anything to harm anybody. They would all be practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So when the mind only sees the problems, it will be worried, and it will worry about everything that's going on in the world. But when you understand the solutions to those problems, now you can have concern. I'm concerned about the world. It's really unfortunate that the world has come to the point that it is, where there's so much hostility and bitterness and anger in the world. But the only thing I can do to help is host these classes and share these books and give personal guidance and share audiobooks and all the. That's the only thing I can do. I can't go to a particular person and say, hey, that war that you're about to start, it's because of your craving, anger, and ignorance, and you shouldn't do that. It would be really unwise. They're not going to listen to me. I'm nobody, right? I'm a nobody. So the only person that I can help is the person who chooses to show up here to learn. And that's why I help the people who show up here to learn. So when you realize that everything that's happening in the world is based on those people's decisions, and those people's decisions are affecting them, that's their karma. And then their decisions don't affect me. Like someone choosing to make a war, that's really unfortunate. And I have concern for those people who are being impacted by war, but I can't fix it. It's not because of me that that's been created. So I can't solve it. So it's not, I'm not the cause of that war. So therefore I can't fix it. So because of someone else's craving, anger, and ignorance, that's what's caused the war, is their craving, anger, and ignorance. And they have to fix their craving, anger, and ignorance in order for the war to stop. So when you realize that everything that's happening in the world that's unwholesome is based on individual decisions in each individual's mind, based on their craving, anger, and ignorance, and you can't fix each individual's mind, all you can do is fix your own mind. And if you get to the point where you have fixed your own mind and you're able to help other people, you might choose to have classes and stuff like this to be able to help people, but they have to choose to come and learn. You can't force a person to eliminate their craving, anger, and ignorance.
Yeah, the quicksand analogy is very helpful.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't jump in the quicksand with people. But you can have concern that, oh, there's somebody in the quicksand. Oh, let's try to help this person get out. Let's offer them a hand, right? Let's offer them a hand. Oh, this is really unfortunate. Someone's fallen in the quicksand. Let me give them a hand. But the moment you get all upset and you get discombobulated because of it, you can't help anybody at that point. You might slip and fall in the quicksand yourself. So the best thing you do is keep your mind calm, stay composed. Hey, grab my hand. No, look me in the eyes, grab my hand, stop being so frantic, grab my hand, right? Hold on. Okay, now you kick. I'll pull, but you kick, right? So I'll offer you classes, but you have to do the work. I'll give you the free books, but you have to read them. I'll host the classes, but you have to come and learn, right? So I'll pull, but you got to kick.
Connection to generosity,
yeah,
and the sharing, how that, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you guys ready for lunch? Yeah. Okay. All right, so it's almost 12:30. So why don't we take a break until 2 p.m.? That's like an hour and 40-minute lunch. If you guys would like to go out, have lunch. If you'd like to come back here, take a nap, rest, relax, spend time with each other. If you guys would like to go do a group lunch somewhere, we can go do a group lunch. It's up to you. There's a great Indian restaurant here in Chiang Mai that oftentimes people like to go to. If you guys would like to go taste some Indian food, I'll guide you guys over there because that's probably where I'm going to go to have a lunch. You guys are welcome to join along if you'd like. So we'll get back together at 2 o'clock and we're going to start with, I'm going to share with you how to determine whether you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment or not. And then after we talk about that, then we'll have kind of a closing discussion and a wrap up. So thank you all for your discussion. Thank you for your questions. And we'll see you guys at 2 o'clock perhaps. Okay. Enjoy your lunch. Enjoy your lunch. Bye to everyone online. See you guys.